Welcome to Silent Moon Wisdom, where each Zen story not only lulls your mind into deep sleep, but also gently washes away the layers of worry clinging to your soul. Here, we don't try to escape the noisy world. We simply close the door on a long day, just for a while, to listen to the quiet whispers within ourselves. When night falls and the world outside grows still, that's when the world inside begins to speak. Maybe you've had a day full of pressure thoughts you haven't released, worries piling up inside. But let each Zen story here be like a breeze drifting through your mind, soothing every tense thread until you can peacefully drift into sleep. These are not dogmatic sermons or distant theories. Each story on this channel is a breath, a pause, a moment of silence in the loud symphony of life. They lead you back to a deep stillness where the mind stops struggling and the heart stops carrying its heavy load. So now lie down softly, release each breath gently, and let me guide you into the world of these magical Zen tales. And now, as the air around you quiets, let us begin with the first story, The Zen Master and the Black Cat. By the banks of the Ganges, when the crescent moon brushed the sky like a thin stroke of ink, the village of Venuvana lay still like a closed book after a long day. The night breeze carried the scent of freshly harvested rice mingled with ripe mangoes, softening the air like a lullaby. A distant temple bell chimed low, its ancient hum weaving through thatched roofs and wooden eaves like an old breath. At the village's edge, on a stretch of golden sand by the river, stood a small bamboo hut nestled among ancient mango trees. This was the home of Zen Master Sobita, a gentle sage the villagers revered, like a cool spring in the dry season. No one knew his exact age. Some said 60, others guessed over 80. But what they remembered was not a number, but his eyes kind as sunlight through leaves and deep as an old well, where anyone who peered in could see their own face more clearly. Each morning at sunrise, people found Sobita meditating under the largest mango tree, sparrows perched on his brown robe without fear. Village children often hid behind shrubs, peeking and mimicking his stillness. Adults came for advice. Those who lost crops quarreled, at home dreamed bad dreams, or suffered poor business. He never spoke long, just a few words like smooth pebbles, yet each one landed perfectly in the cracks of their hearts. Until one autumn evening, a guest came uninvited. It slipped in like smoke, yet changed the air as if someone had blown out a lamp, a black cat. It was so thin its bones showed through tangled fur eyes, glowing dim yellow, like tiny embers in the dark. As it glided silently across the porch, only its shadow stretched over the ground like a spill of ink. Village children called it Shadow Night. Not because they had touched it, none dared. They only whispered rumors. Shadow Night once appeared on a rooftop, and the next morning misfortune struck that house. It once stared at a sick man, and he died before sunrise. No one knew if it was true. But once fear takes root, people no longer need proof, only something to pin it on. The adults feared it more. At the morning market, they muttered, "Seeing a black cat before leaving home means bad luck. If it stands at your door at night, you'll dream of death." Maybe it's a spirit in disguise. So if they saw a shadow slip at the lane's end, they turned away at once. And as happens with things we don't understand, but think are dangerous, fear grew 10 times larger than the cat itself. That night, Mother Anoma walked with her teenage son. She froze. Shadow Knight crouched on the path tail, curled golden eyes glowing like tiny coals. "Don't look at it," she whispered, trembling. "We've had enough bad news tonight." Jatin, 18, tall and thin, forced a smile to mask his unease. "Mom, it's just a cat." But his smile faded when wind rushed through the bamboo, carrying a faint, eerie meow, like a knife slicing silence. The crescent moon tilted like a cold eye watching. In that sound, everyone thought was a curse. Only one man didn't flinch. Zen Master Sobita, sitting on his porch, quietly mending his worn brown robe. He looked at the cat as if at a drifting cloud and smiled gently. "You're hungry, aren't you? Come." He brought out a steaming bowl of milk, placed it softly on the step. The cat arched back tail, flicking eyes, unblinking as if reading a riddle. Sobita didn't move closer. He just sat calmly by the milk gaze, steady as still water. When the night deepened like a curtain, the cat crept forward, lowered its head, and lapped as if drinking moonlight. News of the black cat staying with the Zen master spread like fire on dry grass. Groups came to the hut that night, clutching oil lamps, eyes sharp, as if watching an exorcism. Devon, the richest merchant, sighed. "Master, since the cat came, my wife can't sleep, children cry. Everyone says the black cat brings misfortune." Sobita finished softly. Devon nodded, face heavy. Mira, the potter, small and clay-stained, whispered, "I don't believe it. But last night I dreamed my kiln collapsed. I woke shaking and broke 3 pots. An old cloth seller added, it leapt across my shop yesterday. I lost 3 customers this morning." Whispers swirled. Under the wavering lamplight, the cat lay curled, licking its fur, ignoring the storm of suspicion. Sobita closed his scripture and looked at the tense faces. When the mind is restless, every shadow swells. The cat is just a cat. The swelling is your fear. No one spoke. Wind rustled the mango leaves. Jatin asked softly, "But why is fear so strong?" "Because you believe the story you keep telling," Sobita said gently. "You tell it again and again, until you forget it's only a story." He paused, letting the words sink like a stone in a well. When the mind is anxious, it's like a dark room. In darkness, a rope looks like a snake, a leaf shadow like a ghost. But when you light a lamp, you see just a rope and a leaf. So it's not the cat that scares you. It's the darkness in your hearts, making it a monster, Mira whispered. "But what if it really brings bad luck when you believe it will?" Sobita said that belief plants misfortune in your actions. Shaking hands are not caused by cats, but by thoughts. Shifty eyes not by omens, but by panic. And those shakes and glances make you stumble. Then you blame the cat. The murmurs faded. Wind blew. Far temple bells hummed. The black cat nuzzled Sobita's feet and dozed like a child. Some still doubted, but a few shoulders eased, as if when one man fears nothing, darkness fades a little. As people turned to leave, Sobita spoke firmly, yet calmly. "Tomorrow night, when the moon is full, I will tell you a story. If you still fear after that, I'll take the cat away." Such a simple promise, yet in the buzz of fear, it felt like lighting a candle in a room long used to darkness. The crowd dispersed, footsteps crunching on sand, whispers fading into the night. Only the pale crescent moon, the soft wind through mango trees, the Zen master and the black cat sleeping side by side, 2 darknesses no longer afraid of each other. Full moon night. Silver light draped the mango grove like mist, over leaves, bamboo roof, and the faces gathering around the yard. The whole village sat in a circle. Oil lamps lined the path flames, small and steady, casting gold on jars and pots. No one spoke loud. All sounds seemed to hush before the night's stillness. On the porch, the black cat lay curled. Under the moon, its fur was no longer ink black. Streaks shimmered like silk threads. Beside it, warm milk steamed gently scent mingling with the damp earth after a long day. The cat opened glowing amber eyes, wary yet tired, as if it had traveled far to rest here. Zen Master Sabita sat on a low step back against a wooden post, brown robe, still as tree bark voice, soft as flowing water. Long ago, there was a traveler named Nadika who feared his own shadow. Each sunrise he saw it following and thought it was a ghost, so he ran. The more he ran, the more it chased. He ran until his throat burned and knees gave out. Then he met a sage standing in an empty field. The sage said, "Stand under the tree's shade." Nadika stopped, and the shadow disappeared. He realized what he had fled from all his life was never outside. He was running from himself. A breeze rose from the Ganges, cool and sweet, rattling the reeds. Shoulders softened. Mira whispered to the wind, "I am Nadika when the kiln roars. I fear the roof will fall. Even a crackle of coal makes my heart jolt. My hands shake, and the pots really break." Next to her, Devon the merchant let out a faint laugh that sounded like a dull knife scraping. As for me, every time I open the market, criticism is already ringing in my head. Before I can even open my mouth to invite customers, I already see myself failing. Then, I can't sell. At night, I blame the heavens, the earth, and even the cat. Sobita looked at each person. His eyes were like a mirror, not judging, only reflecting. He spoke each word falling with weight. Our mind is like a drum. Whatever you strike it with, that's the sound it echoes. If you strike it with fear, it returns the sound of fear. If you strike it with the breath, it returns the sound of peace. A brief silence. People could clearly hear their hearts beating in their chests. Jatin, the young man sitting in front, asked as if holding his breath, "Then, what should we do, Master?" Look straight at fear, call it by its true name, then return to the breath. Don't chase it away like chasing a thief. Say to it, "I see you." Fear hates most to be seen clearly. It survives on the darkness inside us. A child sitting beside his mother looked up and pointed toward the doorstep where the black cat was hunched over licking milk. "Master, what about it?" Sobita tilted his head, smiled, his voice gentle, as laying a cloth upon water. "It is hungry. It is cold. It is tired. It doesn't know what bad luck is. The label bad luck is what we put on it. We stick a sign on its back, then fear the sign itself." In the back row, old woman Sita propped herself on her cane and cleared her throat. Her back was bent like a thatched roof, but her voice was clear. "But Master, all my life I've heard people say a black cat is a bad omen. For so many years, that's how it's been. All our lives, people have also said, the night is frightening. But night is when seeds sleep so they can bloom tomorrow. It's not the night that is frightening. It's the mind refusing to be still in the night." The words fell like a handful of seeds. Everyone sat still, listening to the night breathe. From the village path came the slap of hurried sandals against the earth. A young man arrived late, face pale, panting. "Master." At the forest's edge, there's a roar. They say a tiger has come. This black cat must surely be a bad sign. A ripple of agitation moved through the circle like wind. Some people unconsciously huddled closer. A few mothers pulled their children into their arms. The cat pricked its ears, eyes wide, tail stiff. like a dry twig. Sobita remained composed. He looked at the young man and nodded. I will go to the forest's edge at dawn. As for tonight, we will breathe together. He raised his hand, palm open, as if inviting something simple. We have long forgotten the breath. His voice was slow and even, like counting steps across a bridge. Breathing in, know you are breathing in. Breathing out, know you are breathing out. Don't fix it. Don't force it. Just know. The circle followed. At first, there were only choppy, hurried breaths, like little birds trying to sip water. Then gradually, the breaths rounded and lengthened. Shoulders dropped, backs softened. The sounds of insects, leaves, the river touching the bank, all seemed to slow by half. Sobita continued each line a step down into deeper stillness. Breathing in, see fear as a cloud floating overhead. Breathing out, smile at it. Breathing in, place a hand on your belly and feel it rise. Breathing out, feel it fall. Breathing in, name it. Hello, anxiety. Breathing out, hello, peace. Up front, Mira placed her clay-marked hand on her chest. From her eyes a clear drop fell, not a tear of despair, but ice melting. Devon looked down at his hands, used to counting money, and measuring, now resting quietly on his thighs. He felt warmth in his palms. He realized that for many seasons he hadn't touched reality. He had only touched the scripts he himself had written today. I fail tomorrow. I fail, my life is failure. His exhale lengthened. Old Sita felt the heartbeat that had long pounded like a war drum soften into a temple drum. She gently repeated the master's words. Night is when seeds sleep so they can bloom tomorrow. In the darkness, she sensed the fragrance of new rice sprouting. The child who had pointed at the cat now looked at it with different eyes. The cat hadn't changed, still the same ears, the same rising chest, but the gaze had changed. The cat was no longer the culprit of every bad omen. It was simply a living being, breathing with everyone else. A soft breeze, an old mango leaf, fell touching the ground so lightly, that only those who were still could hear it. Sobita spoke as if concluding a short sutra. In this silence, see clearly, fear is not a boulder. It is a cloud. He paused. Everyone remained seated. No one wanted to break the delicate thread just stretched between them and the night. Then slowly the Zen master shifted to an explanation. Not long, but enough to nail each point into the listeners' hearts. A boulder stays in one place. A cloud passes by. When we call fear by its true name, we see its nature. It changes, it comes and goes. Don't carry it on your shoulders like a boulder. Watch it drift. A boulder presses down. A cloud obscures. When we are afraid, our vision narrows. We think there is no path because the cloud covers it. But when wind blows, the cloud parts. The path is still there. A boulder is hard to touch. A cloud is easy to touch. All it takes is one breath. Breathe in deeply. Breathe out slowly, and the cloud parts like a curtain. The circle slowly opened their eyes. The moon had risen higher, brighter. The bowl of milk by the step was half empty. The cat licked its lips and looked around the circle as if wondering why everyone was so calm tonight. The late arriving young man, the bearer of tiger news, could finally fill his lungs. He scratched his head, embarrassed. Master, the roar. I was so scared. Sobita smiled without mockery. Fear is natural. It's all right. What matters is what we do with it. Tonight we sat with fear. Tomorrow morning we'll go to where it arose. He looked around, his gaze warm as a fire, warming hands in winter. Whoever wants to go, come to the hermitage at first light. We will go to the forest's edge. The atmosphere changed, no longer a buzz of panic, but a shared resolve, the quiet agreement of those who had just learned how to stand beneath the tree's shade. Before ending the session, Sobita guided one more short round of breathing. Breathing in, know the body is sitting. Breathing out, smile to the body. Breathing in, know the mind was afraid. Breathing out, know the mind is at ease. Breathing in, know the cat is here. Breathing out, know we are here. Both are here. A ripple of smiles moved around the circle. The last line sounded like wordplay, but it opened a way of seeing the lines between me and it, between person and omen, between I and darkness. All are chalk marks in the mind. The night stands outside those lines, spacious and forgiving. When the meditation ended, no one hurried home. People sat a while longer, letting the silence soak into their bones. Some placed dried fish at the doorstep and a clean cloth for the cat to lie on. Mira gently stroked its back. Its fur was warm under her hand. Devan looked at the bowl of milk, then at the night. He thought of hot tea each morning of 3 breaths to start the day of a smile before opening his shop. He realized that perhaps the first act against bad omens is not to run or drive them away, but to become steady oneself. Old Sita stood leaning on her cane, but her steps were firmer than when she arrived. She looked at the moon and told herself, the night isn't as frightening as it used to be. Jatin stayed until last. He put his palms together at the porch. Master, I see it now. Fear is like a cloud. I once believed it was a rock. Sobita nodded, eyes kind. Good. Tomorrow we will touch the rock. The village imagines the roar at the forest's edge. Who knows, when we come close, we may find it's only wind caught in thorns. The cat let out a soft meow. No one startled. The sound was like a note plucked in a melody that had finally found its rhythm. And as everyone left the yard, the night seemed to walk beside them, not threatening, not lurking, just accompanying them like an old friend. High in the sky, the full moon shattered into 1,000 shards of light on the river, then gathered back into a circle like fear, coming and going like breath in and out. On the porch, the bowl of milk stood half empty. The black cat stretched, curled up, and slept deeply. Sobita pulled a cloth over the steps so the night wind wouldn't chill its belly. He watched a moment, then closed his eyes. In the stillness scented with mango leaves, the night seemed to slow. Not because the night had changed, but because people's hearts had. That night, fear in the village remained like a strip of cloud, not yet fully thinned, but it had grown lighter, truly lighter. Because some had sat with it, called it by its name, breathed with it, and smiled. At dawn, when the first light poured its pink milk over the sandbank, footsteps would gather again at the hermitage. They would walk to the forest's edge, where the roar came from somewhere. They would come close. They would look straight at it. And if fear was only a cloud, the morning wind would part it. As for tonight, this is enough breathing in, breathing out. Fear is not a boulder. It is a cloud. Daybreak. Night mist still lay thick like a white cloth along the dirt road leading to the forest's edge. Each step pressed into the earth with a faint crunch, as if the ground itself was holding its breath so as not to break the hush of dawn. Zen Master Sobita walked in front. His long brown robe drifted at his heels, but his posture was straight like a pillar of stone. His hands were lightly clasped, tucked behind his back, relaxed. The early wind tugged at his robe, lifting and letting it fall, as if it too knew to walk slowly beside someone so calm. Behind him moved a small group, Jatin's slender eyes still moist with night gripping a bamboo stick. Mira hair, hastily tied hands, still marked with dry clay though washed. Devan, the market merchant head, wrapped in a scarf, sweat beading on his brow, though the air was cold, and a few other villagers, each with a look that was half fear, half resolve. And the black cat. No one called it, no one brought it, but somehow it padded along at the very back, its shadow sliding over the mist, like a living trail of ink. The mist thickened as they neared the forest. Tall sala trees loomed like giant gray statues in the gauzy haze. The morning birds had not yet begun. The air was perfectly still, holding only human breath and the soft tap of a stick against exposed roots. Jatin whispered, afraid his voice might knock loose the bit of moon still snagged on a branch master. "Do you hear anything?" Sobita did not answer. He stopped and tilted his head. And the sound came again, a roar deep and drawn out, like a saw blade cutting through fog. The sound was so strange, it had no clear direction, as if rising from the belly of the earth, as if echoing from the forest's throat. Faces blanched. Someone tightened a grip on their stick. Devon swallowed hard, eyes fixed on the dim tangle ahead. In his mind flashed 100 scenes. A tiger as big as a cow, fangs like knives, eyes red as embers leaping out. The black cat suddenly shot its tail upright, body taut like a bowstring, then sprang toward a thicket. "What is it doing?" Mira gasped, reflexively clutching Devon's sleeve. The whole group froze. Everyone held their breath, eyes locked on the cat's shadow, plunging into the wet grass. Then from inside the brush came a jumble of sounds, wheezing, groaning, scratching chords rasping against thorns. A few sleeping birds burst from their nests, wings churning the damp air. Sobita did not panic. He simply raised his hand as gently as signaling the wind to stop, then stepped forward, each step slow and steady, like someone entering a sanctuary. He parted the cold, wet leaves to either side. Everyone held their breath. And then the truth appeared. Not a tiger, not a monster, not some ill omen of the dark night. Only a small calf, scrawny and trembling so hard its knees knocked together like two pebbles. Its eyes were wide with panic, the whites showing, gasping for breath, its throat producing distorted sounds, a fake roar. A mud-smeared rope had twisted tight around its hind leg and gotten caught in a thorn bush. Each time it jerked to break free, the thorns raked its skin. It hurt, it bellowed, and the cry echoing off hollow tree trunks warped into a roar. And so the whole village had been terrified all night. The black cat stood beside it like a small lump of coal, then gently rubbed its head against the calf's leg, letting out a tiny purr, the first sound since they arrived that held no fear. Mira let go of Devon's sleeve, clutched her chest, and burst out laughing, but tears fell at the same time, mixing like sunlight and rain, meeting. My goodness. We were afraid of a calf all night. Devan's shoulders dropped. He plopped down on a nearby rock and exhaled, as if letting the air out of a chest swollen all night. And I sold nothing all morning because of a calf's cry inside my head. Jatin still stood frozen. He looked at the small calf, then at the adults' faces, now flushed with embarrassment, then turned to the black cat. He whispered, voice hoarse, "It," pulled us closer to the truth. Zen Master Sobita knelt by the calf. his hand light as a dragonfly's wing worked the rope loose loop by loop. Each time the rope slid off the calf's flesh, the animal trembled, but its eyes gradually softened. The last coil came free and fell onto the wet ground with a soft thud, and the whole group exhaled as if an invisible rope around their own hearts had just been untied. Sobita soothed the calf. His voice wasn't loud, but each word seemed etched into the air. Do you see, fear always wears a larger mask than it truly is. It borrows the tiger's voice to frighten us. But when we come close, we find only a calf caught in thorns. The morning breeze passed through, and the thin curtain of mist seemed to dissolve with his words. Mira bent down and gently wiped a small bloody scratch on the calf's leg, her gaze tender as if cleaning a paint smudge on a precious ceramic piece. Devon stood dusted off his scarf, and for the first time in days, a real smile lit his eyes. Jatin sat, held out his hand for the calf to sniff. It pulled back, then suddenly stuck out its tongue and licked his hand, warm and damp, a lick that melted his fear like salt in water. Then the group led the calf back to the village together. Passing clumps of bamboo and dewy rice, no one talked about tigers anymore. Instead, they spoke softly about breakfast, the rising sun, and finding the calf's pen, things that were real, no longer shadows made up in their heads. As the small procession stepped onto the village path, their feet on gravel sounded like a lively drumbeat. People on both sides stopped and stared wide-eyed. Not a tiger. It's a calf. Good heavens. Last night I hid under my bed. Then laughter burst out light as pebbles skipping across a pond. Someone started clapping, then another, then the whole crowd. The applause spread like fire through dry fields, lifting a long-missing sense of relief. Devon winked at Mira. I think I'll sell twice as much tomorrow. Mira laughed aloud. And I think I'll throw 3 times as many pots. Old Sita, hearing the news, hurried out with her cane, laughing until tears fell onto her hem. I prayed all night. And it turns out, I was praying for a little calf. The whole village cheered, as if a boulder had been lifted from their shoulders. The black cat lay in the early sun, half asleep, its gold eyes no longer glittering with last night's worry, but warm like melting honey. Its tail flicked lightly its head, resting against the calf's leg, as if to say, "See, I told you nothing to fear." Sobita stood aside quietly, observing his eyes kind, as morning sunlight pouring over the fields. In that moment it seemed not only the calf had been freed from its rope, the village too had been freed from another rope invisible, but tighter than thorns, the rope called fear. And Sobita understood that from this morning on, they would look at the cat with different eyes. For once truth is seen with one's own eyes, the legend of darkness has no reason to exist. That afternoon, as the sun tilted toward the riverbank, honey gold light spread across the fields and slipped into every thatched seam and wooden eave. The air in Venuvana felt light, as if newly bathed, clean, cool, and scented with fresh earth. From afar, the temple bell rang steadily, its deep tone like an ancient heart, marking the shift from one day to the next. The small temple at the village edge shone like a moon rising in daylight. Oil lamps were lit along the porch, their wicks kindling into small flames, bowing in the evening breeze. The lights were not harsh, but warm and gentle, like kind eyes gazing down. Before Zen Master Sobita's bamboo hermitage, villagers set out bowls of warm milk, fragrant with cinnamon, and a few golden strips of dried fish wrapped in banana leaves. No one told them to, yet everyone did. Some even arranged wildflowers around the milk, as if setting a tray for an honored guest. It was an apology to a small living being they had once called a bad omen. The black cat, once avoided in whispers, now lay curled on the doorstep, eyes half closed, tail waving like a black ribbon. As each bowl of milk and piece of fish was placed down, it didn't pounce like a starving creature. It sniffed, slowly, licked a little, paused and lifted its head to look at the people around it, as if asking, "Really? You're not afraid of me anymore?" Children gathered behind their parents, pointing with bright eyes. One little one, cheeks flushed by the sun, suddenly exclaimed, "It isn't shadow night anymore. It's beautiful." Another chimed in, "Let's call it little night, like a gentle little night." Laughter popped like bubbles, and the new name was accepted in a heartbeat. From then on, no one called it shadow night. The new name, little night, gentle as a crescent moon, washed away old fear, like rain, erasing footprints in sand. Zen Master Sobita stepped onto the porch. The wind moved through his robe, as through bamboo leaves, light, leaving nothing behind. He looked around, his smile, a fine thread, yet enough to stitch together trembling hearts. "Tonight," he said softly, "we will not drive away bad omens." He looked straight into each person's eyes. "We will learn to call things by their right names." He sat down in the center of the yard and signaled everyone to form a large circle around him. Cloth rustled, straw sandals whispered on the packed earth. A curl of incense rose, fragrant like slow-burning wood. When all had settled, Sobhita raised his hand and counted on his fingers, voice steady, like laying stones for a new foundation. To call by the right name means this. First, this is fear. It is not me. It is not the truth. It is simply fear that is present. Second, this is the breath. Even if fear remains, the breath is here, faithful like the ground underfoot. Third, this is the body trembling. No shame, no resistance, just the body trembling like a leaf in the wind. Fourth, this is the story my head is telling. A story, nothing more. It may be true, it may be false, it may be only a passing shadow. He paused, eyes kind and bright. When you look straight like that, fear loses its power to rule. It becomes only a small cloud in a vast sky. No one spoke for a while. In that silence, they could hear coconut leaves clicking together like a light rain. Mira raised her hand first, her eyes still tinged with doubt, like someone standing at a lake's edge, hesitant to dip a foot, "Master. Every time I'm about to take the broom to sweep the kiln, my chest tightens. It's like a stone pressing down." Sabita looked at her, voice low and gentle. "When that happens, place your hand on your chest." He placed his hand on his own chest to demonstrate fingers spread like 5 petals. Breathe slowly, as if pouring honey through a bamboo tube, and say softly, "Hello, fear." He tilted his head, eyes glinting with a smile, then smile. A real smile, even a small one, tangles fear up. It won't know where to cling, because fear hates a genuine smile. Mira chuckled softly, like someone just given a small secret. She put her hand on her chest, closed her eyes, and took a breath. When she opened them, the stones seemed half as heavy. Devon folded his arms and nodded. "As for me, tomorrow morning before the market, I'll start with warm water, 3 deep breaths, and this line. Today I sell goods, not fear." The circle laughed, beads clacking like a mallah. A child clapped. Devon laughed too, this time without strain. A smile like a man who had taken a rock out of his pack. Old Sita, sitting slightly apart, both hands on her cane, spoke in a trembling voice like a thin silk cloth in the wind. And me. Every night my heart races. It's like someone is knocking on a door inside my chest. Sobita nodded, voice warm as a hearth. Then light a small lamp. Place it before you. Look at the flame and count 7 breaths and say, I am not fear. I am seeing fear. He emphasized each word like tapping notes on a bell. When you say that fear can no longer wear the mask of yourself, it will only be a guest, coming and going. Sita nodded, lips pressed, eyes shining. Her back seemed a little less bent. As people took turns sharing the cat, Little Night hopped lightly into Jatin's lap. It curled like a small ball of night, breathing evenly, its chest rising and falling like gentle waves. Jatin laughed, his voice breaking like someone catching himself in a private joke. Turns out last night, I was afraid of my own shadow on the wall. I thought the shadow was a monster, but the shadow was just me, stretched long. Sobita looked at him, eyes bright like sunbeams through mango leaves. A shadow exists only when there is light. He turned to the circle, voice deepening, as if speaking to their roots. Fear exists only when there is consciousness. He paused, then smiled slowly. Both point to one thing. We are alive. His words fell, and the circle fell silent. You could hear someone's heartbeat and the cat's soft purr, like a lullaby. When you see that, Sobita continued, voice soft as a blanket, being grateful, even for fear becomes possible. The sun had set completely, but the temple yard still seemed bright, not from lamps, but from faces changed in tone. Each person in some way looked a few years lighter. Fear hadn't vanished, but it had stepped down from the driver's seat. And Little Night, once seen as a bad omen, now slept in the middle of the circle belly, rising in a low note-tail, gently sweeping old thoughts out of the yard. A few weeks passed since that misty morning at the forest's edge, and Venuvana seemed changed, as if someone had lifted a gray veil off the whole village. Mira's kiln glowed steadily each day. Gone were the mornings she sat stunned before the fire fingers, shaking at the thought of the roof collapsing. Now, every motion was sure, like a musician's hands, steady eyes, focused breath, even. When she lifted a new pot from the kiln, her whole body moved in one stream, slow, steady, fully present. On the shelf, pots lined up like fresh songs, shaped by peace. Devon's stall buzzed with voices, no more standing and frowning at his reflection in a basket predicting failure. Instead of starting with, "No one will buy today," he began with a cup of warm water, 3 deep breaths, and the line that made his neighbors laugh. "Today I sell goods, not fear." When customers came, he offered tea. If they didn't buy, he still smiled as if they had purchased the whole stall. Laughter replaced complaints, and strangely his goods sold out earlier. Old Sita slept through each night something that hadn't happened in years. Each morning she opened her door early, stepped onto the porch with her cane, and bowed to the sun like an old friend. Her wrinkled face lit up whenever the light touched it. Neighbors said she was like a late lotus that still found a way to bloom. And the black cat, once eyed with suspicion, truly became the village's friend. No one avoided it. No more wary looks. No more sidestepping as if afraid to step on an omen. Children tied a thin red thread around its neck and called it the thread of courage. Whenever it crossed the temple yard, they would touch the thread, then touch their hearts, as if pocketing a little bravery. Little Night, that new name, blended into the village's breath like the scent of cooking smoke. It napped on roof tiles sprawled in sun, on the brick yard, nestled by anyone who sat down. Sometimes it strolled along the fields, its shadow a brushstroke on a bright page, and no one read that shadow as a curse anymore. That night, the sky was unusually clear. It looked like black velvet embroidered with countless points of light. A crescent moon hung tilted thin as a shy smile. The river breeze was cool and smelled of fresh weeds. The whole village sat in the temple yard doing nothing, just looking at the stars and listening to the water. Jatin, the young man whose hands had once shaken at the forest's edge, sat close to Sobita. He was silent for a long time, then asked softly, as if afraid to break the moment, "Master, in the end, how do we let go of fear and anxiety?" Sobita didn't look at him right away. He looked at the river where starlight broke into glittering shards, then answered slowly, each word falling into the water like a pebble, sinking deep. "First look straight. Call fear by its right name. Don't run. Don't sanctify it. Don't inflate it into a tiger. Don't bury it like a rock. Just name it. This is fear. Second, breathe in. Breathe out. Bring the body back to the present so the mind stops making movies. When you breathe deeply, the breath is a rope that moors you to shore, so imagined waves can't sweep you away. Third, place fear in a wider frame. A pinch of salt in a bowl is salty. In a lake, it's mild. Open your heart, and fear shrinks. Look around, insects chirp, moonlight glows. Friends sit beside you. When you see the whole scene, that pinch of salty fear dissolves as if it never was. Fourth, do a small kind act right when you're afraid. Give someone a bowl of water. Stroke a cat. Untangle a rope caught in thorns. Kind action steadies the mind like feet, finding ground in a flood. And lastly, don't believe every story your head tells. Verify with reality. Like that morning, we went to the forest edge and found a calf, not a tiger. The mind is an excellent storyteller, too excellent enough to fool us. Jatin sat quietly. The stars reflected in his eyes like a small pond. He whispered, voice fragile as a dry twig snapping in the wind. I understand. Fear is the calf's cry, and the mind is the echoing forest. Sobita turned his smile like a lamp, lighting a dark porch. And your compassion is the path that leads us through the forest. That night, the whole village listened to the river. No one urged anyone home. No one thought of tomorrow. They just sat and listened to water touching the shore, to the wind brushing the sandbank, to their hearts settling like fine powder sinking in water. Little Night nestled against Mira's feet and purred softly, a sound like the easy breathing of a living being. No longer a bad omen, only the warm heartbeat of life. Sobita spoke slowly, voice steady like steps on a familiar road, each word soaking into the earth. When anxiety rises like floodwater inside, the first thing to do is not to run, nor to fight, but to sit down. Sit still like a rock in the current, so the water can only flow past and cannot carry you away. Name the feeling gently, like calling to a crying child. This is anxiety. This is fear. When named, it is no longer a blind darkness. Take 3 deep breaths, slow and long, as if lighting 3 candles in a room that has long been dark. Each breath is a flame dispelling shadows the mind has cast. Always remember, emotions are not who you are. They are guests who come and go. Some days the wind brings joy. Some nights it brings worry. No wind stays forever. So do not identify with them. Do not build a house for them. Let them visit like drifting clouds, then bow as they dissolve into the sky. And when fear is still there, don't wait for it to vanish before living. Do one small kind thing, send someone a gentle message, wash a bowl, tidy a corner of your desk. Any small act will do as long as it reminds the mind that you can still give, that you are not bound in fear's spiral. Such acts are like small stones laid on a path, helping your feet find footing. Always verify reality instead of believing the stories the mind weaves. The mind is a very skilled storyteller, so skilled it can fool us. It can turn wind into a tiger's roar, a tree's shadow into a ghost. Rather than sit and speculate, act to see the truth, make a phone call, step to the door, open the window, turn on a light. With one real beam of light, imagined darkness dissolves. And finally, each night before sleep, whisper to yourself like a protective mantra, I am not fear. I am seeing fear. I am breathing. I am safe. Repeat these words nightly, and they will become a firm embankment, holding back the flood of wild thoughts. When the mind knows the way home, even storms are only passing winds. A fine thread of moonlight lay across the river. A breeze passed. The silver shimmer trembled like a bell breaking into pieces. Sobita stood and gently closed the hermitage door. The small sound was like a period closing a chapter on fear. He looked around, faces no longer tight shoulders, lowered eyes no longer glued to darkness, but looking straight at the night as at a friend. Tonight we learned to look at darkness without fearing it. He spoke slowly, each word set upon smooth wood. In days to come, you will meet other anxieties. But now, you know the way home. He turned to Jatan. Moonlight pooled in his eyes like clear water. Tomorrow morning I will tell another story about a man with a jewel so precious he feared losing it more than he loved living. Jatin tilted his head like a bird listening to Windmaster. Who is that man? Sobita smiled, and the night seemed to soften. His eyes shone like the river at dawn. The merchant who feared losing his jewel. He looked up at the bamboo tops, standing still as if listening. I'll meet you in everyone when the first light touches the bamboo tips. That story will continue tonight's lesson, so we see that not only fear, but attachment binds us like thorny rope around a calf's leg. The temple bell chimed softly. Wind moved through the mango grove, old leaves rustling like distant applause. And right at the porch, little Night yawned, long stretched, then curled up and slept a peaceful period, closing the story while opening a gentle door into the next, the merchant who feared losing his jewel. The story of the merchant who feared losing his jewel. On the eastern bank of the Ganges stood an ancient city called Rajagiri, where white stone streets curved like ribbons, and red-tiled roofs lay close together like small flames. The city wasn't large, but it was famous as a gathering place for traders from all directions, silk merchants, spice sellers, even those who ferried ivory from deep forests. In the central market of Rajagiri, there was a stall of precious gems that was always dazzling even without lamps. Each morning when sunlight first poured through the archway, that stall caught the light before all others, reflecting a rosy glow, like droplets of dawn left behind. Its owner had a name known throughout the region, the merchant Samida. Samita was born to a poor family on the outskirts, growing up by selling small bags of salt to passers-by. People said the boy had eyes like knives. He missed no opportunity. But more than sharp eyes, he had a heart enamored with beauty, so much so that he was once beaten for sitting for hours just to gaze at a round stone. As he grew, Samita poured all the money he had saved into the gem trade. Over 20 years, he went from a shirtless youth leading a donkey along the river to the wealthiest merchant in Rajagiri. Yet nothing made Samita's name like the jewel he now kept. One early summer evening, during a trading trip at a southern seaport, Samita exchanged his wealth 3 boats for a single pearl round as a longan seed, clear as a drop of water, with faint rainbow bands inside light as breath. The seller was an old merchant from a distant island who spoke only one sentence before disappearing into the salty mist. This jewel has no price, because anyone who truly understands its worth will never want to sell it. From that day on, Samita kept the pearl, as if keeping his very heart. He sewed a small pouch inside his shirt, right over his chest. Every night he placed his hand on it, as people do, to check that they are still alive. One afternoon, as river wind carried the scent of new rice into the city, Samita was arranging chests of gems when his old friend, the young merchant Varun, dropped by. Varun teased, "I hear you can't sleep unless the pearl is in your hand." True. Samita smiled, but his fingers clenched the hem of his shirt where the pouch was hidden. "Not that I can't sleep. I just don't sleep deeply. Aren't you afraid your heart will get tired from hugging it all the time?" Varun laughed, like holding a block of ice while thinking you're holding fire. Samita answered softly, eyes never leaving the pouch. "When you've lived with nothing, you'll understand. There are things you cannot let go." Varun looked at him. His smile faded. He sighed. "Maybe. It's because you think you can't let go that it binds you so tightly." The words slipped into Samita's mind like a thin wisp of smoke, not heavy, not loud, but leaving a lingering scent. That night, wind slipped through the shutters, making the oil lamp wick tremble. Samita lay on his side, hand on his chest, feeling the pearl round and cool like a drop of moon sleeping in a cloth pouch. But for the first time, he could not sleep. He imagined the pearl slipping out and shattering on the stone floor. Someone stealing it. A house fire in the night. A day when his hands, old and trembling, could no longer hold on. Thoughts swarmed like ants. His grip on the pouch whitened his knuckles. And then in the dark, he heard a whisper from nowhere, perhaps, from his own chest. "If you wake tomorrow and it's gone, what will you have left?" Samita jolted awake. The room was unchanged. The pearl was still there. But his heart pounded like a war drum. And for the first time, he felt he was no longer the owner of the jewel, but its prisoner. The next morning, Samita went to the market with dark circles under his eyes, his back bent as if carrying something heavier than gold. With every step, he checked his hand, his shirt, the chest pouch. People thought he was bowing to inspect his goods, but in truth, he was bowing to fear. From then on, every gaze became a threat. A child looked at him. He hid his hand inside his shirt. An old woman said, "Your shirt is nice." He thought she wanted to learn where the pouch lay. A strong gust blew across the awning. He clutched his chest, as if the wind itself could steal his treasure. And so Samita began to disappear from life. No more lingering with friends, no more walks along the riverbank, No more watching lotuses bloom in the pond. Only one task remained: guarding. Each evening he locked 7 doors, checked 8 times, and only then dozed off. But the more he guarded, the less he slept. The pearl remained. Peace did not. One sunset, when the red light was about to die behind the hills, the Zen master Cassava stopped by Samida's stall. Cassava was an elder monk who had traveled with a retinue to hear the Blessed One teach in Rajagaha. His face was creased like a map, but his eyes were clear as well, water making people lower their voices without meaning to when they met his gaze. He stood for a long time before the stall, not looking at the gems, but looking straight at Samida. "Your head is bowed a bit too low," Cassava said softly. Samida looked flustered. "Master, my neck is just tired." "No." The monk shook his head, lips pressed like a brushstroke. "It's not your neck that's tired. Your mind is carrying something heavy." Samida forced a laugh. "You say that because you've never kept anything precious. If you had, you would hold it tight like I do." Cassava kept looking at him, eyes gentle as morning. "When you hold a dewdrop too tightly, it breaks. And when you hold a dream too tightly, it becomes a nightmare." Samida didn't answer, but the words remained like a stone dropped to the bottom of a well, causing no ripples, only changing the water's color. That night, lying in the dark with his hand on the pouch, Samida felt like a man standing in the sea clutching a heavy rock. If he let go, he feared he would sink. But if he kept holding it, he knew he couldn't swim. And for the first time since he'd gotten the jewel, he asked himself, "Am I living, or merely guarding a kernel of fear wrapped in a glittering shell?" Outside the window, wind slipped through sala leaves with a rustle, like someone sighing. After that night, Samida began to live as if chased by his own shadow. At first, it was small habits. Each time he left home, he turned back 3 times to check the door. When anyone came near, he instinctively touched his chest to make sure the pearl was still there. Each evening, he stacked chests around his bed like walls. But habit turned to obsession. One day, Varun stopped by again. He stood outside the stall and tapped lightly, "Samida, I hear you haven't gone to the river lately. Want to walk there today?" From the porch, Samida poked out his head hair, a bit tousled, eyes ringed. "Can't. The wind's strong today. And if it is wind, can blow dust. And dust can blur my eyes. And I might drop the pearl." Varun fell silent. He looked at his friend like a man turned to stone. "You're turning yourself into the shadow of a stone, Samida." His voice sank like a bamboo stalk, bending in rain. "One day you'll wake up and find there's nothing left but that shadow." Samida didn't reply. He went inside and pulled down the bamboo screen of the stall, like lowering a wall between himself and the world. Day after day, Samida drew into himself like an oyster closing its shell. No more sitting by the lotus pond, hearing children laugh. No more touching new stones to feel their gentle chill. No more telling apprentices stories of far-off seas and islands, as he once loved to do. Only one rhythm of life remained. Wake, check the jewel. Trade, guard the jewel. Sleep, clutch the jewel. Dream, lose the jewel. And in every beat, fear seeped into his mind like salty water, slowly rusting everything that had once shone within him. One morning, as Samida opened his shop, a girl of about 10 came by, hair in 2 braids, hugging a basket of white jasmine. "Hello, sir," she said politely. "May I place these flowers on your doorstep?" Samida was busy arranging the display case and didn't look up. Don't come closer. I only want to set down the flowers. No. Samita snapped louder than he intended. Don't come near. The girl froze. Flowers tumbled from the basket like a flock of small butterflies shot from the air. Her round eyes reddened, and she darted into the market crowd. Samita stood still, hand on his chest, heart pounding. Only after a while did he realize. He had been afraid of a child holding flowers. He slumped onto a wooden chair. For the first time, he didn't dare look into the bronze mirror hanging from the post. He knew that if he did, he would see a face no longer his own, a face living to guard, not to live. That afternoon, Cassava returned. He stood at the door a long time, looking at the curtains drawn tight against the light. Then he spoke evenly, not asking, not accusing. You have built a cage of gold. Samita started, Master, and you sit inside holding an imaginary bird. Samita bit his lip, eyes dropping like dusk falling. Cassava stepped in, and sunlight followed him across the porch like floodwater filling a dry pond. I once knew a man like you. He sat on a bamboo chair and told the story in a lulling tone. That man once dug up a big stone shot through with veins of gold. Afraid of losing it, he dug a deep pit to hide it. Each day, he dug it up, looked at it, then buried it again. A year later, his hands were calloused, his back bent. When he died, people opened the pit and found nothing inside. Samita looked up, voice hoarse. Someone stole it. Cassava shook his head. No, it was still there, but it had long since crumbled. He paused, eyes still as a well at night. Not because anyone took it, but because no hand had held it with love. Only hands clenched by fear. The words cut through the shell Samita had wrapped around himself, like a blade of wind. The next day, Samita tried what Cassava had said. He opened the curtains. Light poured into the stall, like a wave. The gems in the case sparked tiny flames, like fireflies roused from sleep. And right then, he heard a whisper behind him. Beautiful. How much is it? Samita turned. A stranger in a red cloak was staring at the pouch on his chest. At once, Samita's heart clenched into a fist. His whole body turned to stone. Not for sale, he said curtly. I didn't ask to buy. The man chuckled. I only asked if it's real. Samita didn't answer. He pulled the curtain down and shut the door like a man seeing a storm roll in. That evening, Samita went to find Cassava. For the first time in weeks, he stepped beyond his porch. They sat beneath an old sala tree, where white blossoms fell silently like summer snow. The wind carried the scent of damp earth. The insects' chorus wove a thin fabric around them. Master Samita said, voice rough, I can no longer see the jewel. Each time I open the pouch, I see a trap. Cassava nodded, eyes deep as a nighttime well. Because you're no longer looking with your eyes. You're looking with fear. He paused, then asked slowly, do you know the difference between keeping and imprisoning? Samita was silent. Keeping is when the heart is light. Imprisoning is when the heart is heavy. Cassava laid a hand on his own chest. If each time you touch it, you feel lighter, that is keeping. If each time you touch it, you feel heavier, that is imprisoning. Samita looked down at his hands, fingers once deft with stones, now shaking like dry twigs. I have been imprisoning, he whispered, and I too am imprisoned. Cassava said nothing. He drew a small brown seed from his sleeve and placed it in Samita's palm. This seed is small, but if you keep it in your hand forever, it will rot. He closed Samita's hand and opened it again. Only when you place it in the earth will it become a tree. That night, Samita sat a long time in the dark at home. He set the pearl on the table and looked at it. In the lamplight, it gleamed like a drop of frozen water, so beautiful, it ached. Then he closed his eyes and imagined the day his hand let go. The pearl fell shattered. And suddenly he realized what hurt him was not losing the pearl. It was the thought of losing it. And that thought was killing him more slowly, but more surely than any thief. Outside, a waxing moon hung tilted like a silver sickle, scoring a pale line across the red tiles. In that moment, Samita understood. The pearl had never stolen his freedom. Fear had. After that night, Samita thought he had understood that new insight would free him. But understanding doesn't mean one can let go. The light cassava had planted in him was thin as a thread, while the darkness in him was thick as the whole sky. Samita began to dream. Each night, as the oil lamp dimmed, he drifted into tangled dreams of real and unreal. He dreamed he walked into the stall, opened the chest pouch empty. He dreamed of Varun standing in the market with the pearl in his hand, shining, smiling broadly, while he himself stood bare with nothing. He dreamed the pearl slipped from his hand, rolled across the floor, shattered into thousands of bright fragments, then vanished like a swarm of fireflies blown out. He jolted awake, drenched in sweat, like someone who'd just swum in a cold sea hand, grabbing at his chest. It was still there. But his heart ached, as if someone were tightening a rope around it. Each morning he walked to the market like a walking shadow. People whispered, Samita isn't the same. He's aged 10 years in a single lunar month. And it was true, deep furrows scored his forehead like cracks in drought-hardened earth. One afternoon, while he was counting stock, a new apprentice dropped a small box of stones. The clang rang out like a sword slashing the air. For the first time in his life, Samita shouted, "What are you doing?" The boy turned pale. I was just careless." "Careless is how thieves pretend," Samita growled. The boy stepped back, lips trembling, his small hands tucked behind him, like broken wings. Then he bowed his head and ran out of the shop, his basket clattering. Only the sound of Samita's heart remained pounding, like a frantic drum. He collapsed onto a wooden chair, head in his hands. "I just drove away a child, because I imagined he wanted to steal the jewel." As darkness slowly covered the porch, he realized he now saw everyone as a thief, including himself. That night, black clouds rolled in from the sea toward Rajagiri. The wind howled like a prisoner playing a flute, ripping at the roof tiles, whipping branches like leather whips. Samita locked 7 layers of doors and sat in the pitch-dark shop, clutching the jewel tight against his chest. Outside, thunder hammered the sky like a smith's mallet. Then a crack sounded from the roof. A beam snapped and crashed down, knocking the gem shelves into a heap. In the chaos, all he saw was a round flash rolling out of his hand. "No, no, no!" He cried out as if his lungs were being torn, lunging after the glint, knocking everything aside. Pots, shattered stones, scattered shards of mirror fell like a rain of blades. He dropped to his knees, raking through the floorboards, every plank, every crack, until his knees bled. His vision swam. Amid the whirlwind, he caught his reflection in a broken shard, wild eyes, bulging hands clawing like an animal. Then something happened. The jewel lay right in front of him, slowed and stopped, as if it had never gone anywhere. Samita grabbed it, and clutched it, shaking hard tears, pouring like a child who's found his mother in a panicked crowd. But the moment he clenched it again, a hollow ache twisted up. If next time I don't find it then. What he looked around, the entire shop was wrecked. Other gems were smashed, fine ceramics lay in pieces, and amid the ruins, there was only Samita, gasping like a survivor after a house fire. The next morning, Zen Master Cassava arrived, stepping through the debris, saying nothing for a long time. Then he asked softly, "Did you win the storm?" Samita gave a ragged laugh. "I kept the jewel." Cassava shook his head. "No, the jewel kept your body, but your mind is broken." Samita squeezed the jewel in his hand, voice unsteady. "Master, if I lose it, I won't know who I am anymore." Cassava looked at him, eyes gentle as morning. When a person fuses themselves with a thing, they no longer know what is self and what is object. And then he placed his hand on the jewel, not taking it, only touching it lightly. They begin to fear even their own hands. Samita was silent for a long time, then spoke, his voice like wind, whistling through an empty doorway. "I don't know how to let go." Cassava nodded. "Because you've never truly looked at fear, only at its shadow." He stood and drew his robe around him. "At dawn tomorrow, I'll wait for you on the south bank of the river. Bring the jewel." Samita looked up, stunned. "You want me to take it outside?" "No." Cassava smiled, the first morning light falling on his shoulder. "I want you to bring your fear into the light." That night, Samita didn't sleep. He spread an old cloth in the middle of the room and set the jewel on it. He sat and looked. Lamplight sparked shimmering bands within the jewel like tiny galaxies. And for the first time he saw his hand, shaking not from love, but from fear of loss. He whispered, "Are you a treasure or a shackle?" The jewel was silent, but in that silence he heard his heart beat like a death knell. He understood that the next day he would have to choose keep living in a golden cage or open the door to let the wind in, even if it might carry everything away. Dawn came. The sun hadn't truly risen, just a thin pink streak along the horizon, like someone gently stirring a coal beneath the night's ash. Samita walked the dirt road to the south bank, gray cloak on his shoulders, steps slow and heavy, like a man carrying his whole house on his back. Against his chest, the pouch lay round and cold, like a second heart beating with fear. With every step he touched it again, as if without touching it would vanish. Zen Master Cassava was already waiting, seated beneath an old sala tree, its trunk twisted like ancient script, its leaves trembling faintly in the breeze. He watched Samita approach, said nothing, and gave a slight nod, like greeting a wave touching shore. Samita sat down facing the river. At dawn, the Ganges was flat as a bronze mirror, the surface washed in faint pink. Thin veils of mist drifted low like ribbons, swirling around their feet. Cassava asked very softly, "Did you bring it?" Samita nodded, hand on his chest. "It's here." "Good." Cassava nodded, eyes still on the water. "Now place it down in front of you." Samita froze, as if the master had asked him to cut out his heart. What if someone takes it? If a gust of wind can take it, it was never truly yours. Cassava turned his gaze brighter than the water. "Put it down, before you yourself no longer belong to you." Samita slowly opened the cloth pouch. Light broke out like a drop of dawn. He set the jewel on the grass. His hands trembled like a man lowering his only child into a river. They sat still. Only a light wind stroked the grass and teased small ripples across the river. Cassava said, "Now close your eyes. Place your hands on your knees. Breathing in, no, you are afraid. Breathing out, no, you are breathing." Samhita closed his eyes. At first, his breath was short and jagged, like a man climbing a steep hill. Then, it lengthened, deepened. Cassava continued, "Imagine you no longer have it. Tomorrow morning you wake and the pouch is empty. People look at you not with admiration, but with pity. How will you live?" Samhita's heart tightened, as if struck by a cold wind. He whispered, I don't know." "Good." Cassava's voice was low and steady, because not knowing is the first door to freedom. When you don't know, you can actually see. When you think you know, you only repeat old stories in your head. They sat in silence for a long time. The wind blew. A yellow leaf fell spinning down to land beside the jewel, as if to say, "I was once green, then yellow, then I fell. And I do not regret." Cassava opened his eyes and looked straight at Samhita. "Now pick up the jewel and throw it into the river." Samhita's eyes flew open. "No," the word cut out like a blade. "I can't." "Why?" Cassava asked, as gentle as early morning. Because, Samhita choked. "If it's gone, I'll have nothing." "No." Cassava slowly shook his head. "If it's gone, only then will you have everything back." Samhita shook his head, breath quickening. He clenched the jewel, his palms slick with cold sweat. He stood and walked to the water's edge. The Ganges was still as a mirror. The surface reflected his face, worn, gaunt, older than Cassava's. Behind him, Cassava spoke like a sutra. Letting go is not losing. Letting go is to stop losing yourself. If you can't let go of the jewel, then let go of what you think it gives you reputation, worth safety. They are only clouds clinging to a drop of water. Samhita looked at the jewel. It glimmered gently like a child's eye. He stretched his hand out over the water, trembling, then released it. The jewel fell from his hand, falling very slowly, slipping through the air like a drop of moonlight. But instead of sinking, it touched the water and floated. It drifted, lightly, very lightly. Samhita stood stunned, not understanding. Cassava stepped forward, smiling. "I coated it in dried sala tree resin. It won't sink." "Master," Samhita panted, "you knew beforehand. I only knew this. Some things float only when you stop trying to hold them down." Watching the jewel drift, Samhita felt his whole chest lighten, as if someone had lifted a slab of stone off him. Tears welled, not from loss, but from being given back to himself. They sat on the grass, watching the jewel bob along like a small splinter of sunlight. Samhita whispered, "I thought without it, I'd be empty. But now I feel empty and light." Cassava nodded. Because emptiness is the natural shape of peace, and you can only fill your life with new things when you dare to have empty hands. Samhita bowed his head, shoulders long held tight, opened like a bird spreading its wings. Cassava stood and patted his shoulder. "Let the jewel drift a while longer, then scoop it up if you wish. But remember now, it is only a jewel. It is not you." The wind stirred. Sala leaves rustled like applause. Samhita gazed at the water, and for the first time in years, truly smiled, not for having, not for holding, but simply for breathing. That afternoon, as the sun laid long red ribbons of shadow across the roofs, Samhita returned to Rajagiri. He walked the familiar white stone streets, as if for the first time, no longer a man hunched over a secret, but one walking empty-handed, back straight eyes, bright. On his chest, The cloth pouch still rested feather light, as if holding only wind. Inside was still the jewel, but now it was no longer the one key that held his life, just one drop of light among the many lights of a life. Market people saw him, and many stopped short. That's Samida. Look at him. He's different. Varun, his old friend, stepped up, eyes wide. I thought you'd turned into a statue in your stall. Samida laughed, a true laugh, not forced, not twitching. I used to be a statue, but this morning I thawed. Varun blinked. You still kept it. Samida nodded. Yes, but now it can't keep me. Varun looked at him for a long time, then smiled like a man seeing dawn shine into a room he thought abandoned. The next morning, Samida flung open every window of the shop. Sunlight poured in, golden as honey. Bright dust floated in the air like thousands of glittering grains. He no longer stacked chests around his bed, no longer counted locks each night. The jewel now sat in a glass case. No lock, no cloth covering. People asked, "Aren't you afraid someone will steal it?" Samida smiled. If they can take it, perhaps it belongs to them more than to me. And strangely, once he no longer feared losing, he sold more than ever. Customers came not only for precious goods, but for the calm light in his eyes, a light no jewel could ever emit. At night, Samida no longer curled up clutching his chest like a hedgehog. He spread a mat on the porch, looked up at stars scattered like white salt, and breathed. No dreams of losing the jewel, no midnight jolts awake, just sleep like an ordinary person. One evening, Kasava stopped by, sat on the step, and they drank hot tea together. "How are you living?" Kasava asked. Samida smiled at the sky, like someone who once drowned, now learning to float. "I don't grip anything anymore. I just swim." Kasava nodded, eyes kind. With empty hands, one can hold the whole sky. A few days later, Samida gathered his apprentices. He set the jewel before them and spoke calmly. "I once thought this was my heart. I once lived just to guard it. But in truth, I was only guarding fear." He looked at each young face, lamplight, shining in their eyes like little streams. "Remember this. When anxiety surges, don't run. Sit down, name it, and breathe. When the mind says, lose this, and you lose everything, ask yourself, am I sure? When fear arrives, do a small kind thing. Wipe the table, make tea, smile at a passerby. Because kindness reminds us we are larger than fear. And if one day you have a jewel of your own, remember clutching it tight won't keep it. It only makes you lose yourself." No one spoke. Only the night breathed softly as if listening. That night, as Kasava prepared to leave, Rajagiri Samida walked him to the city gate. Night wind carried the scent of late sala blossoms, sweet as the smell of baked cakes. The moon hung tilted over the wall, round and whole, like a pearl. But no one had to guard. Kasava paused, turned back his eyes lit with a gentle smile. "Tomorrow morning I'll visit the village by the Naranjara River. There's a woman there who clings to her husband like a bird to a branch in a storm, afraid that if she lets go, she'll die of loneliness." Samida nodded slightly as if understanding that fear without having tasted it. The wife fears loneliness. Yes. Kasava nodded, drawing his robe close. One can lose oneself not only by clinging to things, but by clinging to people. A light night breeze passed sala leaves, rustling like a tiny burst of applause, as if even the darkness were congratulating someone who'd learned not to fear the dark. And when Kasava disappeared over the red earth rise, Samida turned back toward the city, hands empty, but his heart full of light. The story of the wife who feared loneliness. Downstream on the Naranjara River, where the sand dunes stretch like the backs of sleeping dragons, lay the village of Satavana. Each afternoon, sunlight shattered into golden shards, scattered over thatched roofs. Each morning, silver mist lay fine as kitchen smoke. At night, wind from the far fields carried the scent of ripe rice and the secret fragrance of salad blossoms falling. On such a night, Anissa stood at the porch, both hands clutching the fold of her robe over her chest, listening to a sound only the very anxious can hear: fear, tapping lightly on the door of the night. Inside the wooden house, Silan, her husband, was packing carving knives, chisels, and a few ebony planks. He was a carver famous throughout the region. Doors he made opened as softly as breathing, and the reliefs he carved could make passers-by imagine the wood was speaking. The next day, Silan would depart with a caravan to Rajagiri to install door frames for a newly built monastery. "How many days will you be gone?" Anissa asked. Her voice was gentle, but a thread of worry snagged at the end, like a thorn. 7 days, if the winds are fair. 10 if it rains," Silan answered, tucking each chisel into a leather pouch. He looked up, his smile warm as a hearth. "I'll be back before the full moon for certain." She nodded, but her hand unconsciously tightened its grip on her robe. The oil lamp flickered on the wall, making her shadow lengthen and shorten, like someone trying to stand steady between two gusts of wind. From the lane outside, sparrows settled on the bamboo fence, chirping. They always returned in flocks, Anissa thought. But each time Silan left, she felt like a bird separated from its flock. For a moment, she seemed to hear her mother's whisper from long ago. "Don't let anyone go too far, my girl. Once they go, they might not come back." Her mother died in a great flood season. Her father left with a salt caravan and never returned. The front door in her house was always kept closed, and in her heart, another door also shut, the one that led to the belief that whoever left would return. Anissa, Silan called softly, breaking the stream of memory. "Don't stand there making friends with the wind. Come here." She stepped closer and adjusted the tie on his tool bag. Her fingers were deft, tightening just enough, but her heart tightened too much. "Maybe you shouldn't go," she said very quietly. "Wait a few more days." "I dreamed of a tiger's roar on the forest road." "A tiger's roar, or your heart's?" Silan squinted jokingly, then grew serious when he saw tears in her eyes. He put his hand on hers. "I know you're afraid, but we promised to do this job. And you know I always come back. People make promises, and sometimes they still don't come back," Anissa blurted out. She bit her lip as soon as she saw Silan's eyes darken. He wasn't angry. He sighed and drew her to sit on the wooden chair he had made its back, carved with blooming sela flowers. "Listen to me," Silan said. "There's a wise man by the riverbank, they call him the Zen Master Maitri. Tomorrow morning before I go, I want us to visit him." A Zen master, Anissa was hesitant. "I have nothing to say to him." "You have fear," Silan said gently, "and fear deserves to be heard, not locked up like a bird in a cage." Anissa was silent. On the porch, the sparrows suddenly flew up and scattered like fragments of a cloud. She watched them and felt the entire sky was one big net. Only the net inside her was tightening harder than any knot. At dawn, a thin mist still lay over the Naranjara. Zen Master Maitri sat on a rock under an old sala tree. He was not that old, like late afternoon light not yet gone. His eyes were bright and calm, like an ancient well. Some said he had traveled with mendicants to hear the Blessed One preach near Rajagaha. Others said he had never left this village. Which was true, did not matter beside him. People breathed easier. Anissa and Silan arrived and put their palms together in greeting. Maitri nodded, and his gaze touched the trembling in Anissa's hands, like a warm wind drying dew. Master Silan began, my wife. Each time I travel far, Anissa can't sleep. A kind word for us, if you would. Maitri looked at Anissa. She suddenly wanted to speak honestly. I'm afraid of being alone. Anissa said, I'm afraid the door will close and no one will knock. I fear hearing the wind and imagining it's the fairy calling someone away forever. I fear the long, empty stretches between the times my husband returns. She hesitated, then blurted out, I'm afraid if one day my husband doesn't come back, I'll shatter. Maitri did not rush to instruct. He simply sat with those words for a while, as if setting them down on the ground to see their true shape. When you fear being alone, he said slowly, you are listening to a story in your head. I will be left behind. You listen and believe it over and over until you become that story. Then what do I do to make it stop? Anissa asked, her voice both pleading and a little challenging. I've tried keeping busy. I've chanted mantras. I've stared at the fire until my eyes ached. It doesn't need to stop. Maitri smiled. You only need to see it clearly. When you call it by its right name, this is the fear of being alone. The story no longer has the right to bind you as before. He placed his palm on the ground. Fear is like wind. If the door is open, wind comes in. If it's open further, wind goes out. If you seal it shut, the wind gets trapped and becomes a storm inside the house. Silan looked at Anissa and squeezed her hand lightly. Can we open the door? If I open the door, won't fear carry him away? Master Anissa asked. Wind doesn't carry people away, Maitri replied. Wind only reveals what already wants to go or wants to stay. What wind does is teach you to stand steady. A flock of sparrows swooped down near where they sat, chirping brightly. Maitri tilted his head to look. Do you see? They always go and always come back. No sparrow holds the sky, but the sky can hold them all. Anissa smiled softly for the first time that morning. The smile was thin as a brush stroke, but enough to change the color of the picture. Master Silan said, I must leave when the sun climbs the hill. Please teach Anissa a way to breathe so that each evening when shadows lengthen, she isn't swallowed by them. Maitri nodded. He told Anissa to sit with her back straight, shoulders dropping, as if setting down a heavy bag, hands resting, palms down on her knees. Breathing in, know you are breathing in. Breathing out, know you are breathing out. Breathing in, name it. Hello, fear of being alone. Breathing out, smile. I am present. Anissa followed. At first, her chest was tight like a closed door. Breath short. Then slowly the door eased open and breath entered like a guest returning after a long absence. She opened her eyes and the river looked brighter, not because the sun was higher, but because there were fewer clouds inside her. I'll practice, she said each time the shadow passes the porch. Good, Maitri smiled. He looked at Silan. You will go as all rivers go. But remember, home is not where you stay. It is where you keep your presence. Write 3 things on a leaf. I will return. I am breathing. I am loving. Each evening when you light the fire, think of these 3 as stones under the pot. The pot will be steady. Silan nodded. He turned to his wife. "I will come back, Anissa." I know, she answered, this time with less storm in her eyes. The caravan departed when the sun stood like a blade's edge above the hill. Wheels ground on sand. The oxen snorted. Ceylon turned back and waved. Anissa leaned against the porch post. She did not run after him as usual, did not clutch his sleeve like grasping at the water's edge. She placed her hand on her chest, breathed in, breathed out. "Hello, fear of being alone," she whispered. "I see you. I am present." From the bamboo grove, the sparrows leapt again, weaving into a small cloud, and then drifting apart, each in its own direction, none lost. Watching them, Anissa suddenly remembered a story her mother once began when she was a child. Long ago, the Buddha sat beneath the Bodhi tree and heard the sparrows quarrel over grains of rice. He smiled and told them a story. Her mother had not finished it. The flood season had swept the stories away. By evening, shadows stretched long. Anissa set out a meal for one, then put out a second chair by habit. She paused and pushed the chair back. "I am here," she reminded herself, "and being alone is still a small we between me and my breath." The door was ajar. Wind slipped through old bamboo slats, creaking like an old song. She didn't light every lamp, only one. Shadows still danced on the wall, but they no longer threatened. A shadow exists only when there is light. She remembered the master's words, and that light is inside me. The first night without Ceylon, Anissa didn't sleep much, but the wakefulness was calmer than any night before. At times, fear knocked. What if bad news comes in the morning? She went to the actual door and opened it. Mist rushed in like a cold friend. No one was there, only late sparrows huddling together in the bamboo, quiet and warm. "I see you," she said to fear, as to a child who had cried itself tired. "Sleep now." She closed the door, but didn't lock it with 9 bolts as she used to. She went back in, sat on the wooden platform, placed both hands on her belly, and counted 7 breaths, like someone had once taught old Sita in faraway Venuvana. On the 7th breath, a clear drop fell from her eye, salty but light. On the second morning, she brought a basket of flour to the pottery kiln to help a neighbor. "Do a small kind act," the master's words echoed. She washed 10 bowls, wiped a table, carried a pot of tea to the widow at the lane's end. Each small deed felt like laying a pebble on a slippery path. Her feet slipped less. On the 3rd afternoon, the wind was strong. Black clouds rolled down from upstream low as a ceiling. Fear knocked again. What if the forest road collapses? What if floods? What if... She opened the window, turned on a lamp, and stood still, watching the rain pass like a hurried procession. Verify reality instead of believing rumors in your head, she murmured like a mantra. The rain was real. The imagined scenes of an overturned cart and a stream sweeping someone away were only films her brain was projecting. On the 4th night, she heard a light knock. Her heart jumped. She stepped onto the porch. A drenched boy stood at the door, clutching a cloth bundle. "Ma'am," he said, "my mother told me to return this silk scarf. You lent it to wrap the water jar the other day. Come in, child." Anissa smiled, opening the door wide. He entered, leaving small wet footprints on the floor. It had been a long time since Anissa had felt that a house with a human voice was not frightening. It was warm. When the boy left, the sky had cleared. A thin band of stars cut the night. Anissa left the door wide for a while, letting the night pass through like a friend. She neither drove it away nor begged it to stay. She only breathed. On the 5th day, A post-runner passed through the village with news from Rajagiri. The monastery's first door frames were up the work crew safe. Anisa let out a very long breath, one she felt she hadn't drawn for years. On the 6th evening, she sat by the bamboo fence, chopping greens for the chickens. The sparrows landed by her feet, their eyes black and shiny like beads. She sprinkled millet. They hopped over beaks ticking against the ground. One small sparrow stood apart from the flock and watched her a little longer. She bent down and spoke softly, as to a child. "You'll go, and you'll come back, little one. No sky leaves anyone behind." The sparrow spread its wings, circled once above Anisa, drawing a ring of peace, then joined the flock and vanished. On the 7th afternoon, as the sun slanted across the bamboo, the familiar creak of wheels sounded at the head of the lane. Anisa did not run. She rose slowly like someone who has learned to stand steady and walked to the gate. Silan waved from afar. When he came close, Anisa embraced him, but just enough not to hold him back, but to welcome him. "I'm home," Silan said, eyes bright, "and I see. The house is intact and so are you. I learned to breathe." Anisa smiled, and I learned to open the door. At dinner, they ate slowly. Anisa told of the boy returning the scarf, of the heavy rain, of the sparrows. Silan told of the new monastery of sunlight on ebony, of an old craftsman chanting a verse while setting a frame. Door opens and wind enters. Door opens further and the heart is calm. That night before sleep, Anisa placed her hand on her belly and took 3 long breaths. She whispered, "I am breathing. I am at ease." The fear of being alone, once a noisy guest, still lingered somewhere, but it had grown smaller, more polite, standing outside the door, waiting to be invited in for a talk, no longer staging raids. When Silan returned, Anisa thought she had defeated her fear. But like weeds, fear doesn't die after one dry season. It lies under the soil, waiting for soft rain to sprout. Silan came home with the scent of sun, new wood, and a few gold coins. In the first days, the house was like a bell full of resonance. Their voices mingled with the wind, with cooking sounds, with Silan's stories of the newly raised temple roofs in Rajagiri. Anisa thought everything was at peace. But on the 4th night after his return, as Silan slept beside her, Anisa started awake at a soft tapping. Her heart lurched. Her first thought was, "He's going to leave again." She lay on her side, watching Silan's shadow on the wall. It rose and fell with his breathing, and each rise and fall sounded in her head like a warning. People stay, then people leave. Everyone leaves. Outside, late sparrows beat their wings in the bamboo thicket, rustling like paper. She remembered sitting curled up years ago, hearing her father leave and never return, her mother gone and never return. Memory doesn't die. It just lies still, waiting for the dark. Anisa sat up and stepped out to the porch. The crescent moon was thin as a bright cut across the sky. She stood a long time, arms around her shoulders, feeling as empty as if she stood alone on the edge of a cliff. I mustn't let him go again. The thought flashed through her mind, light as wind but sharp as a blade. From the next day, Anisa began to track each step of Silan's, not with her eyes, but with the ear inside her head. He stepped into the garden. She heard it as footsteps about to fade. He put away his chisels. She heard it as someone packing luggage. He looked out the window. She heard it as eyes searching for a road. "I'm not going anywhere." Silan laughed when she suddenly clenched his sleeve as he rose from the table. I just want to be sure, she forced a smile, but her hand didn't let go. Silan wasn't angry, but in his gaze flickered something Anissa had never seen, a shadow of fatigue. That night they lay quietly together. Wind crossed the porch and rocked the oil lamp. Their shadows touched, then parted on the wall. Anissa whispered almost to herself, "If one day you don't come back, how will I live?" Silan didn't answer at once. He only turned and held his hand on her nape, as if protecting a fragile stem from breaking. That day hasn't come. Don't live it in advance. She wanted to believe, but in her mind, that day had come 100 times. Each time like a play. Silan walks away, does not return. No knock at the door. The sparrow's sound gone. One noon, when her unease rose like floodwater, Anissa walked to the sala tree by the Naranjara. Zen Master Maitri was sitting there, hands folded, before his belly eyes, half closed, as if listening to the earth's heartbeat. Anissa knelt down, tears spilling before she could speak. "Master, I thought I was getting better, but the closer I am to my husband, the more I fear losing him." Maitri opened his eyes, gentle as a September sky. "It's like holding water in your hands. The tighter you squeeze, the faster it runs out. So I should let go," she asked, alarmed. "Not let go of the person. Let go of the idea that if you lose him, you will no longer be anyone at all." He bent down, picked up a dry leaf, and placed it in her palm. "Look at it. It was once green, once drank sunlight. Then it turned yellow and fell. It does not hurt. It only changes form." Anissa looked at the leaf, her hand trembling slightly. "But I'm afraid, if he changes form, no one will look at me the way he did. Because you haven't looked at yourself long enough." Maitri said, "You borrow someone else's gaze to know you exist. But that gaze is the moon. It illuminates, it doesn't make you grow. True light comes from the lamp within." A breeze from the river lifted the leaf from her hand. It spun once and drifted down by Maitri's feet. He smiled. "Your breath is that lamp. Breathe deeply. Remember that you are still here even when someone else is temporarily absent." But understanding didn't overcome habit. Even though the master's words were like honey in her heart, a panicked bird still beat its wings whenever Silan's eyes strayed from her too long. Once Silan went to the market saying he'd be back by late afternoon. When the sky had already turned to dusk and he hadn't come, Anissa's heart tangled like wet thread. She paced the yard wearing a path in the grass. The sparrows came back late, chattering on the fence. What if he met thieves? What if the cart overturned? What if he never comes back? The sound of wheels at the head of the lane sent her running. Silan appeared safe, carrying a sack of rice. "It's dark already. Why are you out here?" Anissa rushed to embrace him, saying nothing. Silan looked down, worry flickering in his eyes. "You're shaking like someone who just escaped a disaster." "Because I thought you wouldn't come back," she whispered. For the first time, Silan didn't laugh it off. He held her tighter, but his voice sank. "Anissa, I'm here. But if love turns into only the fear of loss, then it's no longer love. It's a chain." The words cut through a layer of mist in her heart, like a thin blade revealing a cold truth behind it. Her love was wrapped in anxiety, and that wrapping was suffocating it. That night when Silan slept, Anissa sat up alone, lit a small lamp, and set it in the middle of the room. She remembered Maitri's words, "When the darkness grows, don't push it away. Add another lamp." She took a small plank and began carving. Her hands had learned to carve from Silan back when they first married. The words she carved were, I don't own anyone. I am only blessed to walk with them for part of the way. Each chisel stroke, each fleck of wood that flew off, was like loosening a thin chain around her chest. By daybreak, the plaque was finished. She hung it on the front door where the morning light would be the first to read it each day. A few days later, when Silan returned to the workshop, Anissa stayed home, cooking and grinding flour. Over the sound of the mill, she murmured, as if soothing an invisible child, "You can go, and I still remain me. You can be absent, and I still have life in each breath." Each sentence was like dropping a small stone into a fast current, slowing it just a little. At noon, she went to the river again to see Maitri. "I feel a little better. But it's like walking a tightrope, one strong gust, and I'll fall." Maitri nodded. "Because you still think you're walking alone. In truth, the wind doesn't blow to make you fall. It blows to teach you to open your arms. Tightrope walkers don't cling to the rope, they embrace the wind to keep their balance." Anissa looked at the sky. A flock of sparrows flew past in a big V, the pointed tip heading south. Aren't they afraid of falling, Master? They don't think about falling. They think about flying together. Anissa bowed her head. For the first time, she felt that loneliness and freedom might stand in the same place. That autumn, the sky was mirror blue, and the wind soft as silk. Silan received a letter from a temple in Savatthi inviting him to repair door frames eaten by termites. He came home eyes bright like a child called into a dream. "Anissa, this is a rare chance. It's an ancient temple doors, carved from King Bimbisara's time. If I do well, they'll order a dozen new sets. We could trade thatch for tiles, buy another ox hire help." Anissa tried to smile, but in her chest, a panicked bird had already taken off. "How long?" "Will you be gone 15 days? 20 if the weather's bad." She nodded, but her heart felt like it had been dropped down a deep well. That night, she lay still beside him, eyes wide in the dark. The insect's chorus felt like tiny needles constantly tapping at her mind. This time, it's farther, longer. If something happens. The thought was like a stone rolling down a hillside, small at first, then dragging a landslide. Silan left the village under a new moon, thin as a blacksmith's sickle. Anissa walked him to the lane's end, a smile on her lips, but her clasped hands had gone white. "I will return," Silan said, pressing his forehead to hers. "I am breathing. I am loving. I remember," she whispered. Then he went, his figure shrinking on the sandy path, like a sail slipping farther from shore. The first day, Anissa tried to wrap time in tasks. She wove, swept the yard, and polished the family altar. Each time fear surged, she closed her eyes and breathed, as Maitri had taught, "Hello, fear. I am present." But on the 7th day, gray rain fell. The river swelled with white foam, and the road to Savatthi was blocked by floods. Villagers murmured. I heard the middle span of the stone bridge washed away. A merchant is stuck on the far bank. A timber caravan got swept off. They didn't say Silan's name, but to Anissa, each rumor cut like a small knife. On the 9th night, the wind shifted and howled through the bamboo like a wounded beast. Anissa didn't sleep. She couldn't. Every time she closed her eyes, her mind projected black and white reels, Silan under mud arms, limp. Silan pulled off the bank by the current eyes, staring like stone. She jumped up and stalked the house like a ghost. Her own shadow stretched long like a crack. "You're not allowed to disappear. You promised." she whispered, her voice splintered like old wood. A soft thud on the porch made her flinch. She ran out, only a dry branch tapping the post. The wind rose, tore at the shutters, and blew out the single lamp. In the thick darkness, the fear of being alone rushed in like a pack of wolves. There was no distance left, no reason, only one feeling: I have lost him. I am alone forever. She dropped to her knees, clutching her head, sobbing without sound. The cry wouldn't come out. It clogged in her chest, like a wounded animal's low growl. Near dawn, Anissa drifted like a sleepwalker to the Naranjara. The water ran muddy as ash, churning with foam. Zen Master Maitri sat beneath the sala, his brown robe wet with rain, yet his bearing steady as ancient stone. Master Anissa cried, "I can't bear it anymore. What if he's dead? What if he doesn't come back? What if?" Maitri said, voice light yet sharp as a bamboo blade. "You're living in, if not in this morning. But what if tomorrow never comes? Then today is still today." Maitri stood and walked toward the bank, gesturing for her to follow. "Put your hand on your chest. Close your eyes. Listen to your heart, not your head." She did. At first, all she heard was the river's roar, but beneath that thunder was a small, stubborn, insistent beat. Her heart. "Feel it," Maitri said. "You are alive even if you are not sure he is. You are breathing even if you are not sure he is. So why are you letting yourself die before someone else?" She burst into tears, but this time the crying came out flowing like a flood, fierce, then softening like receding water. 3 days later, a post rider reached the village. From his saddle, he handed over a wet cloth bundle. Inside was a letter from Ceylon. "The flood blocked the road. We had to take shelter in a village by the stream. All are safe. I miss you. I am breathing. I am loving. I will return." Anissa sank to the ground in the yard, the letter trembling in her hands like a small bird just freed from a net. He was alive. But in that moment, something mattered even more. She was alive too. She stood, looked up at the sky blue again after the storm, and heard the sparrows chattering back on the fence. Perhaps the truly frightening thing was never losing him. The frightening thing was that she had forgotten she still existed, even without him. After Ceylon's letter arrived, the fear in Anissa's heart didn't vanish, but it softened like a fierce animal, stopping its roar to lie down with a long breath. She began waking before dawn, when the sky was pale like old glaze, and sat on the porch just to breathe. For the first time, she heard the morning, without anxious noise, the rooster's crow, the crackle of kindling, the sparrow's songs, like droplets falling steadily into her heart. She remembered Maitri's words. "Loneliness is only scary when you mistake it for a pit. In truth, it is an empty plot where nothing's been sown. Start sowing your presence there." And she began to sow. Anissa chose one small kind act each day. On the first day, she cooked porridge for the widow at the lane's end. On the second, she helped the children weave baskets. On the third, she carried water to the field hands. Each time she reached out her hand to give, the fear in her chest stepped back, like a shadow pushed away when you light another lamp. By evening, when she returned home, she no longer rushed to fling the door open to check. The house was still quiet, but it was no longer empty, because she was present in it. One noon, she met Maitri again beneath the sala. "Master," she bowed, "I'm still afraid every day, but I no longer drown in it. It's like I'm standing in water up to my chest, but I'm not flailing." Maitri smiled. because you've stopped fighting the water." He pointed to the sky. The sparrows were drawing a circle, each bird splitting off and rejoining like a dance. "Do you see none of them ties another with a string? Yet they still fly together, because each knows how to fly with itself first. When you can fly alone, you no longer fear losing the flock." Anissa watched the small wings glide against the blue, and a quiet thought took root. Perhaps loneliness isn't an enemy. It's the yard where you learn to walk on your own feet. That night, Anissa didn't light every lamp as before. She lit only one and set it in the middle of the room. Sitting cross-legged, she looked at her shadow on the wall, no longer stretched like a crack, only swaying lightly like a bamboo leaf. She whispered, "I am breathing. I am present. I am complete, even when I am by myself." Then she smiled at herself. The first smile in many days that didn't need someone else as its reason. 2 days later, the postwriter returned with news. "The road is clear, the crew has finished. They'll reach the village by tomorrow." All of Anissa brightened like a tree after a long rain. She smiled, but this time without tears. In the afternoon, she went to the riverbank to spread a white cloth to dry. Her hands still trembled a little, but not from fear. They trembled like the earth when a sprout breaks through. But that night, a sudden wind rose. Black clouds sank low. Lightning flashed like knives, slashing the sky. Rumors stirred again. Floods are coming from upstream. A caravan had to turn back halfway. Fear rushed straight into Anissa's chest like cold wind. But this time, she didn't race around the house as before. She sat in the middle of the room, placed a hand on her belly and closed her eyes. "Hello, fear, I see you. But I am not you. I am the one who is breathing." Outside, the wind howled like a whale, but inside her breath was slow and deep as ancient stone. For the first time, fear knocked, and she did not open. The next morning, the sky was clear again, as if it had never rained. Anissa took a basket of sallah flowers to the river and met Maitri. "Master, I'm still afraid, but now I know the way back when I'm afraid." "Then you've won half the battle," Maitri smiled. "Someone who has never feared is not strong. Someone who knows how to return home in fear that one is strong." He pointed to the Naranjara sparkling in the sun. "Do you see how the river doesn't try to hold the water? It simply opens itself so the water passes through and then returns. So it is with the human heart." Anissa sat with him a long time, listening to the water lap the bank like the earth's heartbeat. And she understood, if you try to hold on to others, to fill your own emptiness, you'll never fill it. Only when you fill yourself with your own presence are you full enough to welcome them home. That afternoon, she went home and tidied the house, not out of fear that he wouldn't return, but because she wanted the house to be bright when he stepped in. She rehung the wooden plaque, whose carving had faded with damp. "I don't own anyone. I only walk with them for part of the way." She stepped back, read it, and smiled. Not the smile of someone who has won a battle, but the smile of someone who has finally lost the right thing, fear. The next morning, the sun rose over the bamboo, like a golden drum just struck, spreading warm light across the village. From afar came the creak of wooden wheels on sandy road. As Anissa swept the yard, her heart dipped once, then lifted. Silan. He emerged through the dust, like an old line reappearing in a painting, still tall eyes bright, his clothes carrying a bit of the road's dust. On his shoulder was a worn cloth bag. In his hand, a branch of Sala in bloom. He stopped at the gate and smiled a calm, unhurried smile. "I'm back." Anissa didn't rush out as before. She walked slowly as if she were stepping into her own breath. When she reached him, she gently touched his hand, a hand that had once been the anchor of her life, now simply the hand of a fellow traveler. "Welcome home," she said, her voice soft as sun-warmed silk. At lunch, light filled the kitchen like honey, and the clink of spoon on bowl sounded like a small bronze bell. Silan ate and told of stone doors in Savatthi, the lion statues guarding the temple, the nights spent on windy hills. Anissa listened without counting the silences between his sentences to measure whether he still belonged to her. She simply listened like hearing rain on the roof without trying to hold each drop. Midway through the meal, Silan set down his chopsticks and looked at her. "Strange. You look different. Lighter, like someone who's set down a pack of stones." "Maybe I have," she smiled. "Set down what?" "The idea that if I lost you, I would no longer be me." Silan paused, then took her hand, his eyes bright as morning. "If love was a chain, then today you've unfastened it. And the strange thing is, when you don't hold me, I want to stay more than ever." That night, they lay on a bamboo mat by the porch. The sky was deep and clear, like an upturned lake. Stars sprinkled white as salt, the sparrows tucked snug in the bamboo. Anissa lay still, not waiting for departing footsteps, not watching Silan's shadow on the wall, as before. She simply listened to the wind flowing through her hair, the gentle beat of her heart, Silan's steady breathing beside her, and for the first time she didn't sleep from exhaustion after worry, but slept like a flower, closing when the night is gentle enough. A few days later, Maitri stopped by, stepping into the yard with a smile gentle as a kind cloud. Anissa served tea and sat with him. Silan was planing wood on the porch, the rasping even as the earth's heartbeat. "Master, I once thought I had to hold tightly to others so I wouldn't lose them. But it turns out, when I stop holding, they can truly stay." Maitri nodded. "Because then you are no longer loving with fear. You are loving with presence. Love with fear constricts. Love with presence opens." He looked at Anissa, his voice like a passing breeze. "You are no longer someone who fears loneliness. You are someone who knows how to be with herself, and someone like that is never truly alone." Anissa bowed. A tear fell, not from sadness, but from gratitude. That afternoon, when Silan went to the river to fetch water, Anissa sat by the door and wrote on a small board. She then hung on the doorframe. "When you fear loneliness, take 3 breaths. When the mind says, 'If I lose this person, I lose everything,' ask, 'Are you sure?' When worry surges, do one small kind thing. Because kindness reminds us we still have something to give. And every night whisper, 'I don't own anyone. I only walk with them for part of the way.'" She read it again and smiled. Not the smile of someone just out of a storm, but the smile of someone who knows whether storm or sun, she will no longer abandon herself. A few days later, Zen Master Maitri bid them farewell to visit the next village. Before leaving, he paused at the porch and said, "Tomorrow, the Blessed One will stop at the Venuvana Monastery, near Rajagiri. He intends to tell a story about sparrows, the weakest creatures in the forest, yet the ones that survived the greatest storm." Anissa tilted her head, eyes bright with curiosity. "Sparrows. So small, how do they survive a storm?" Master Maitri smiled kindly. because they don't try to stand alone in the storm. They fly together, and each still knows how to fly with its own wings. With that, he walked on. His staff tapped lightly on the dirt road. From the bamboo thicket, the sparrows burst upward, tearing a fine white streak across a sky blue as jade. Anissa stood by the door watching them go, her heart light as a bird's wing. The story of the Buddha telling the tale of the sparrows. That day, the sky over Rajagaha was as clear as a sheet of blue silk stretched from one mountain to the next, and the breeze drifted softly like a whisper in a dream. Bronze bells rang 3 long peals from the gate of Venuvana Monastery, signaling that the Buddha was about to arrive. On the dirt road, groups of villagers walked barefoot, arms full of sala blossoms and figs, eyes shining like children, told a full moon was coming. Among them was a young woman named Sona, wearing rough, earth-colored cloth, a rice basket slung over her shoulder, walking quietly at the end of the group. She said nothing, but inside her, an undercurrent of wind was rising. When the people paused beneath the shade of great sala trees, an old man with a white beard whispered, "I've heard there will be a great storm from the sea next week." Last year's storm even snapped the temple roof on the hill. A thin man added, "The sparrows in our village will probably be wiped out. Those little things. A bit of strong wind, and they scatter." Sona stood nearby, hand unconsciously tightening on the basket strap. Her family wove straw baskets, their house set on the edge of a bamboo grove. Under the eaves, there was a sparrow's nest, to which she secretly put rice every morning. The nest sat very low, barely a reach from the ground. Whenever wind blew, it shivered like a thread. Her heart clenched. If the storm came, they would be blown away. When the 4th bell rang, the Buddha stepped through the monastery gate. He wore a robe of brown gold, his bearing light as if walking on water, his gaze as calm as a deep forest well. The villagers knelt. Sona knelt too, but her eyes did not lower to the ground. They rose to the sky where sparrows were darting like flying specks of dust. Unbidden, she spoke almost as if asking herself, "Blessed One, why do such small beings still dare to fly in a world full of storms?" Her voice was small, but it carried clearly in the quiet monastery courtyard. People looked up surprised. No one usually asked like that. The Buddha paused. He looked at Sona, his eyes kind as a windless, moonlit night, and smiled, because they do not think they are small, and they do not fly alone. Sona frowned slightly. "But if you're small, you can still be swept away, right? Small can be swept away. But when they know how to hold hands with trust, they become bigger than the wind." That afternoon, when sunlight poured like honey over the brick courtyard, the monks and villagers sat in a circle under an old sala tree. Leaves rustled like 100 soft, clapping hands. The Buddha sat on an old mat back, straight like a young pine, his gaze seeming to listen to everyone and to each person at once. He looked around and said, "You want to know how small beings can live through storms? I will tell you a story of a flock of sparrows long ago." The courtyard fell so silent you could hear the wind move through the bronze bells hanging along the eaves. Children's eyes opened wide like chestnut shells. The adults leaned forward a little. Sona held her breath. For the first time in weeks, the worry in her chest stopped spinning like a pinwheel, suddenly still when the wind dies. The Buddha closed his eyes for a moment, then opened them, his voice low and slow like a drum receding. In those days, in a forest west of Gijakuta Ridge, there lived a flock of sparrows tucked against a cliff face. Each was the size of a fist, feathers brown, like rice husks, eyes black as peppercorns. They lived by gleaning grains spilled from carts that passed along the forest road. He paused, a gentle sadness in his eyes. And then the storm came, the kind of storm the whole forest believed no small creature could survive. Sona tilted her head, a prick in her chest, as if sensing this would be the answer she had waited for. The Buddha's words fell on slow and even soaking deep, like drops into earth. That was when the smallest things did the greatest thing. Evening wind passed through. The little bells all chimed at once like an omen for the tale about to open. The Buddha told it, his voice low, like a distant drum in the woods. That flock had 13 birds, living in shallow rock hollows along a sheer cliff. Below was a ravine, deep and ink blue, above a dense pine forest full of wind. Their leader was Lima, the largest cockchest, thrust out golden beak feathers, dark brown, like a chestnut shell. Next was Neva, a tiny hen so small that whenever the wind rose, her body trembled like a grain of rice hanging from a twig. Each morning, as the sun edged above Gijakuta like a copper coin, the flock swooped down to the path to pick up grain dropped from merchants' carts. Then they flew back up the cliff wings, beating hard against the uphill wind. They lived in peace like that, until one morning when the wind carried a smell of salt and a far-off thunder. The oldest sparrow, Biru, was scratching his neck with his foot when he suddenly stopped, eyes narrowing, as if he could read something in the wind. "I smell the sea," he murmured. The fledglings blinked. "What's the sea?" Biru shuddered. "The place where storms are born. In this season, if the sea breathes hard, the whole forest tilts." Wind tore through the cleft, and pine needles hissed like pins raking stone. Lima rose to a high spur of rock and looked toward the horizon, where a dark gray band was swelling like a giant beast crawling closer. "We must prepare," Lema snapped. Neva tucked her neck, heart beating like a tiny drum. "Prepare to survive." Biru nodded, his voice dry as old leaves. "No, prepare, not to be blown away before you survive." That afternoon, the flock gathered on a dead pine branch. Lima was stern. "We need to move the nests higher, deeper into the forest. Here the wind will smash us into the ravine." A young cock named Jaro flicked his wings. "No, I'm flying to the lowlands. There are no storms there. I'll live alone if I must." Biru shook his head. "Alone, the wind will snap your wings like a toothpick. Better a snapped toothpick than being swept along with the flock." Jaro retorted, eyes flashing. The others muttered, argued, wings spread, feathers bristling like leaves, twisted in a gust. Neva sat quiet at the edge of the branch, peering into the ravine, her belly knotted like a tied rope. "If everyone leaves, what about the old nests, the unhatched eggs, who keeps them?" she whispered, but no one heard. 3 days later, black clouds had swallowed half the sky, and wind ripped through the cleft with a knife's shriek. Lima hurried to gather straw. Jaro silently sharpened his claws, eyes fixed on the mountain's foot where the plains lay blurred. At night, the wind drummed the cliff until it shook. Gusts peeled off clumps of moss. Eggs in the nests vibrated with each shudder. Neva lay wrapped around the eggs. Every time the wind howled, she convulsed like a thread, afraid to close her eyes. Her head swarmed. If the wind grows stronger, if the nest breaks, if the flock scatters, I'm too small. I can't hold anyone. No one needs me. she cried silently. No voice, only shoulders, trembling like a leaf quivering on a lake. At dawn, Yarrow suddenly took off shouting, "I won't wait for the storm. I won't die here," with a pack of quiverers. He dove toward the mountain's footwings, pounding like a rolling drum. Lima shot up to block him. Yarrow. The wind warns before the storm arrives. Flying now is throwing yourself into its mouth. But Yarrow vanished into the gray, leaving only the clatter of wings like thin metal. The flock went silent. Biru murmured alone, even strong wings turn weak. Niva watched after him, a sharp ache in her heart. Part of her wanted to fly after him to avoid being alone. Part of her wanted to bury herself in rock, to avoid disappearing. Both fought in her tiny chest like twin whirlwinds. By evening, the sky was black as ink stirred with ash. Thunder tore the pines as if someone snapped giant staffs. Gusts slammed in waves each, like an invisible hand slapping the cliff sideways. Lima called, "Reinforce the nests. Hold to each other. The storm comes tonight." Old Biru's legs shook, yet he still flew to bring more straw. Niva rushed out to pull a blade of grass. The wind spun her like a tossed speck of dust, yet she clenched it in her beak and would not let go. No one spoke anymore. Only wings thrashed like one great heart pounding through fear. When night fell, Lima looked around, his voice hoarse. "We are small, but if we share our fear, each carries only a piece. If each keeps fear to himself, the wind will snap us one by one." Biru nodded, eyes glistening. "The storm is stronger than any one bird, but not stronger than the whole flock." Niva looked at the eggs, small as raindrops, and breathed, "If the wind takes my body, may it leave my warmth in this nest." Outside, the first blast screamed like a wild beast, racing along the cliff, making the nests shiver like a trembling heart. The sparrows pressed closer, feather to feather, wing to wing, small and shaking, but becoming a single still mass in a howling dark. The Buddha spoke, voice slow and deep, like a bronze bell echoing through the night. That night, the sky shattered like a clay pot flung to the ground. Winds howled like 100 wild beasts wailing together. Thunder ripped the heavens into white shards like heated metal. The cliff where the sparrows sheltered thumped in waves like a drum. Chips of rock sloughed off. The straw nests pitched hard. Eggs rolled within like droplets torn from leaves. Lima shouted over the storm, "Hold fast. The wind will try to pry each one of you away. Don't let it." Old Biru, weak-legged, gripped the nest's rim with his worn beak, eyes slashed with rain and tears. Niva cradled the eggs with thin wings, body shaking like a grass blade in the gale. Yet she did not let go. Through the howling, a frantic chirp sounded from far outside, thin as a needle piercing the black. Niva started and looked up. Lima heard it too, and the whole flock froze. In the gray sheet of rain, a small shape staggered, tilted, and dropped lower. Yarrow. He had returned. Too late. The wind slammed his body like giant hands, throwing him against the cliff. Feathers flew like torn dry leaves. He tried to beat his wings, but was flung away, hanging in swirling gusts, each vortex tugging him closer to the bottomless dark. Yarrow cried out, voice ripping the rain. "Help me." The sparrows glanced at one another, eyes like little coals burning low. Biru shook his head, voice splintering like a dry twig. "Flying out there is death. Going alone was foolish. Rescuing alone is more foolish." Lima growled softly. "If we let the wind take one of us tomorrow, it will take the next. We cannot abandon each other. Neva felt her heart pounding, like a drumroll wind, howling in her head, like a pack of hounds. She looked at Jaro spinning like a burning leaf, then at the tiny eggs beneath her belly. They were trembling too, as if asking, if Mother flies away, who will we have? Fear tore her in two, like wind splitting a willow branch. Neva stood upright on the nest, rain pelting her back like pebbles. Her voice shook like a straw stem, but rang clear. If the wind can beat the smallest heart, then tomorrow it will beat them all. I am the smallest, so I will fly. Lima's eyes widened. Neva, no. Your wings are weak. Precisely because they're weak, the wind won't see me. She smiled, lips trembling. I'll slip through the wind. Without waiting, she flared her wings and dove into the dark. The wind spun her like a speck of ash water, stinging her eyes like salt. But she tucked herself small like a raindrop. She didn't fight the wind. She threaded the gaps between gusts, like a willow leaf, bending to a blade without breaking. Each time the wind hurled her downward, she didn't thrash. She folded her wings, let the wind think she'd died, then opened them at the exact moment the gust eased. From afar, Jaro was only a quivering black fleck in the maelstrom. Grab onto something. Neva shouted, her voice piercing the storm like a tiny arrow. Jaro looked up, eyes blurred by rain and fear, beak chattering. Neva swooped in, hooked a claw onto a rock ledge, then stretched her neck and pecked hard at Jaro's shoulder, like snapping him out of paralysis. He jolted, wings twitching by reflex. She clamped her feet into his wing feathers and yelled, "Beat your wings with me. Don't fight the wind, go with it." And they beat together, small, weak, but together. The wind roared, but suddenly it couldn't tear them apart. Because they were no longer two separate specks of dust. They were a single joined drop of water. Neva shouted, the sound seeming to rise from her bones. "Send your fear into the wind. Don't clutch it, throw it." Jaro roared, beating his wings harder than ever, and the two of them surged up out of the vortex, shooting toward the cliff, like two tiny arrows fired back into the storm. The nest shuddered as they landed, soaked, matted with mud, but alive. The whole flock burst into chirps loud enough to drown the wind. Lima tapped Jaro lightly on the head with his beak. "You're mad, but thank you for coming back." Jaro panted, feathers ragged like trampled grass, but his eyes were bright. No one survives a storm alone. The wind still howled, but now the flock no longer clung to the rock, they clung to each other. Neva lay by the egg's wings, still shaking, but her heart no longer clenched. Jaro nestled beside her, wing against wing, eyes slowly closing. Lima looked around, voice hoarse but warm like earth after rain. "We are small, but when small hearts link together, the wind can't snap us anymore." Outside, the storm still tilted the whole forest, but in the small stone nest, 13 hearts beat in one rhythm, steady as a little drum, keeping time through the long night. The Buddha went on, his voice softening, like a thin stream spilling over stone. When at last the wind fell quiet like a tired beast asleep, the sky was gray as cold ash in a stove, and the forest lay still, as if listening to itself again. On the cliff, the straw nest was soaked, clumped like a tangled lock of hair, but still intact. The tiny eggs inside glowed with warmth, like drops of milk left behind. Lima lifted his head to the sky, eyes clouded with rain, but shining. "We are still here." Biru exhaled, trembling, the whole flock accounted for. His voice broke like an old shell, dropping to the ground relief. When the first sunlight sliced through the gray clouds laying soft golden threads over the pines, the sparrows shook themselves, fluffed their wet feathers, and received the sun like a new baptism. Yarrow sat quietly, feathers ragged like burnt grass, but his eyes no longer fierce. He looked at Neva, voice rough. "Without you, I'd be at the bottom of the ravine. I thought I was strong, but I'm only strong when someone believes I haven't broken." Neva smiled, weary, but gentle, as the morning I didn't save you. I just flew with you. Yarrow bowed his head. "That's saving." Lima flew over and pecked Jarrow lightly. The one who can bow after the storm, that's the one who truly grows up. At noon, the flock sprawled across warm slabs of rock. No one spoke. You could hear the sun crackle softly on the moss and water drip from the cliff like the earth's clock. Biru sighed softly. "I used to think surviving meant defeating the storm. But it turns out, surviving is not letting the storm take your heart." Neva closed her eyes and listened to her heartbeat. Not fast, not slow, just steady, like footsteps on a dirt road. And for the first time, it wasn't beating from fear. It beat because it was alive. 3 days later, when the sky was clear as water, Lima trained the flock to fly again in the first light breeze. Their wings were still weak, but each beat made the wind less of an enemy. Jarrow flew beside Neva, sometimes tucking a wing so she wouldn't clip the rock no longer, charging ahead to prove his strength, but keeping time so a friend wouldn't fall behind. When they landed, Lima spoke, voice like a whetstone. "The wind will return, but next time we won't have only wings. We'll have each other." The flock chirped softly, sounds tiny, like the first drops of rain, yet ringing like a string of little bells in the wind. One morning, the faintest chirp came from the straw nest. Neva's heart leapt. She darted in an eggshell cracked, like a shard of broken moon, and out of it, a damp little sparrow shivering like a breathing drop of dew. The whole flock crowded, close eyes bright as wet stone. Yarrow whispered, voice tight. "It was born after the storm." Biru nodded, voice wavering. "No. It was born from the storm itself, from not abandoning each other in the storm." Lema looked around, sunlight blazing on his chest. Then let it learn its first lesson. That small does not mean weak, and weak does not mean you'll be swept away if you know how to hold one another. That evening, as the sun draped the forest like spilled golden honey, the whole flock stood on the cliff's edge, 13 small bodies, 13 pairs of wings, looking toward the horizon, where the storm had thinned into wisps like smoke. No one said a word. Only sunlight lay across their feathers, glittering like gold on poor earth. And in that silence, the fear that once tore them apart was now only a small shadow behind them, unable to grasp anyone anymore. The Buddha paused a beat. The evening wind moved lightly across the brick courtyard, making the little pennants around the monastery ripple like waves of silk. No one spoke. Children held their breath, eyes shining, as if about to cry. The adults looked at each other, their eyes like people waking from a years-long dream. Sona, the young woman with the rice basket on her shoulder, sat very still, but inside her something had just cracked open, and something else had just sprouted, like a seedling pushing through earth. The Buddha looked at them, his voice gentle as a lake just after the wind. "You have just gone through a storm with the little sparrows, but that storm was also your own." He looked deep into each person's eyes, then spoke slowly, each word dropping into the air like small stones, tossed into a deep well. Fear does not stop the storm. Anxiety does not strengthen wings. Only trust and the breath can keep the heart whole within the storm. A thin, stooped man stood up, voice hoarse, Blessed One. I am like Jaro. I always want to run before the storm arrives. I'm afraid of poverty, sickness, failure. So I keep running. But the more I run, the stronger the wind gets. The Buddha nodded, eyes lit with compassion. Because you are not truly running from the wind. You are running from the heart trembling in your own chest. And the more you run, the more you leave it alone. He lifted his hand toward the sky where a real flock of sparrows was forming a small V. They do not grow by avoiding storms. They grow by not letting anyone in the flock be alone in a storm. So do you. Sona looked up, eyes brimming, as if someone had touched the softest part within her Blessed One. What if I am too small, if I'm as weak as Neva? How do I keep from being swept away by the wind? The Buddha smiled a slow smile, like sunlight opening a leaf. Small is not what's frightening. It is being alone that is frightening. And being alone is not when no one stands beside you. It is when you forget that you are also part of the flock. Sona looked down at her palm, imagining Neva's tiny wings beating inside the storm, and felt her chest warming as if a small spark had been lit inside. The Buddha rose. The rustle of his robe was like bamboo leaves brushing in a gentle breeze, and the air around the monastery courtyard seemed to fall still, as if even earth and sky were waiting to listen. He turned his gaze toward the far horizon, where the sun was laying its last golden streaks across the ancient forest, and spoke in a voice deep and steady like a drum echoing from the heart of a mountain. When fear surges, pause, not to surrender, but to stop being swept away. Don't thrash like a dry branch in a whirlpool, sit down like a stone in the stream. Name the feeling clutching your chest. This is fear. Just naming it weakens its grip. Take 3 slow breaths. Your breath is the rope anchoring you to the present, so your mind won't drag you to harbors that don't exist yet. He turned back, eyes bright like dew, still clinging to leaves at dawn, his voice gentle but clear. When anxiety closes in, don't let your mind pull you into the stories it invents. The mind is clever at making up stories, and the more you believe them, the further you drift from what's real. Don't sit imagining 100 disasters. Stand up and look, open a door. Call a person, take one small step. Truth isn't as loud as fear, but it's there quietly waiting. He paused, voice slowing, deep and warm like the earth after rain. And when you feel too small, remember, no one is so big, they never need anyone, and no one is so small, they cannot lift someone else. One drop of water can't carry a boat, but countless drops have made an ocean. One sparrow wing can't resist a storm, but 13 wings flew through it because they didn't let go of one another. The Buddha closed his eyes, smiling softly, and the breeze whispered along the eaves like an ending note. Fear is not a period, only a comma, if you know how to pause, breathe, and take a hand. He paused again, then looked straight at Sona. Tomorrow a storm may come. The nests you love may be torn away, but if you are there with steady breath and open hands, then even if the nests are gone, the warmth will remain, and they will build again from that very warmth. Sona swallowed back a sob, then bowed deeply like a ripe stalk of grain, bowing from the weight of its seeds. The sun was tipping toward the forest crest, pouring honey gold light onto the monastery courtyard. A bronze bell rang out, long as if stretching the whole evening, into a single strand of sound. Everyone slowly stood, but their footsteps no longer rushed, as when they came were light like sparrows, just freed from rain. Sona walked last still, carrying her rice basket, but inside now was not only grain, but a small sky just opened in her chest. Dear friend, we've just journeyed through 4 Zen stories, 4 slices of life that seemed small, yet each like a shard of mirror, reflecting our own lives today. The first story, The Monk and the Black Cat, shows us fear isn't in the cat nor in the dark, but in how we imagine them. An entire village once trembled at a shadow until they dared come close touch it and found only a hungry living being. That story reminds us of the teaching on ignorance avidya, that fear is born from not seeing clearly, and the way to dissolve ignorance is not to chase away darkness, but to light a lamp of mindfulness, sati. The second story, The Merchant Afraid of Losing His Jewel, reveals another kind of fear, the fear of losing what we love. The merchant clutched his jewel so tightly he stopped living until he saw the jewel never bound him. It was clinging upadana that chained him. The Buddha taught, "Who does not cling cannot lose." When we stop gripping so hard to protect what is truly precious can stay, not because it's held, but because it's cherished. The third story, The Wife. Afraid of being alone touches the hollow many of us have known. She ran all over the village seeking a hand, to hold only to discover. Loneliness is not the absence of others. It is forgetting that we ourselves are a home to return to. It's a teaching on self-atta and loving-kindness metta. Only when we embrace ourselves with kindness do we stop demanding the world to fill us. When the heart can sit beside itself, loneliness melts like mist. And then the fourth story. The sparrow flock is like a soft embrace for anyone living through life's storms. Those tiny beings didn't grow by fleeing the wind, but by weaving their hearts together and flying through it. It's a lesson on community sangha, the power of togetherness, of care, of mutual lifting. When we stop believing we must be strong alone, that is when we truly become strong. 4 stories, 4 doors opening to the same path. Letting go of fear and worry is not erasing them, but no longer letting them steer our lives. Mindfulness to see clearly, non-self to feel lighter, loving kindness to hold ourselves gently, community so no one stands alone. These are the 4 pillars the Buddha offered humanity, and they remain just as alive in our noisy age. If these stories touched your heart, pause and take one deep breath, then hit subscribe to Silent Moon Wisdom, where each Zen story is like a small drop of water, yet drop by drop can quietly wear down the heavy stones in your heart. Click, like if you feel a bit more at peace after listening, and please share or comment below. Have you ever been like the black cat, the jewel, the wife, or the sparrows? Have you ever feared, worried, felt alone, and still kept flying? Because maybe your story might be the little lamp that lights someone else's path tonight.